Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and The Fool.
I came up with a homebrew D&D rule. So you roll the hit as normal.
Yep.
So every player needs to have two d20s. And you roll the hit as normal with your d20. And if you miss, you keep that d20 in front of you. And that is now the number you have to roll higher than to hit with.
Huh. How's that make sense?
It means that you're more and more likely to hit every turn.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it guarantees combat will end.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you hit, you reset.
Yeah. I see that from a game design perspective, but from a people fighting in a fantasy world, how does it make sense?
Well, it's from a narrative perspective where eventually a hit lands, or someone gets tired and they get a strike, or someone they muster up their courage and they get a heroic strike, a stunning blow.
So it's only for the heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you could have it for the monsters, but then you need a lot more dice.
Yeah.
And it'd be a bit more fiddly. It would make the game slightly easier, and it would actually potentially because you would be hitting, if you had no ability to hit whatsoever, you'd still be hitting like once every 3 turns or something.
Yeah.
So it could actually encourage players to have like 2 dexterity or 2 strength, whatever your to hit skill is, and then just rely on it. But it's still better to have reliable hitting going on.
It's interesting. I've played through the range of D&D from basically all levels now. I've actually played, I did a campaign, we finished it, but from level 5 to level 20 of 5th edition. And you encounter this interesting problem later on, which is after a certain point, basically the enemies can't miss you and you can't miss them, because your AC in 5th edition basically maxes out at 20. Like you can get it up maybe to 23 or 24 if you have some insane items, but that's where it maxes out. So the to hit bonus around that area goes to plus 16 and higher, and like the people with a low to hit bonus is plus 12, and the really low is a plus 8.
5th edition is weird because at level 1, a normal, like I think my warlock I made had like a plus 5 to hit.
Yeah.
Which is a bit weird.
Yeah, so it's already skewered 5th edition, but later on, oh, he has 24 AC. Oh no, I have a plus 16 to hit. There was certain enemies whereas I could only roll a 1. Like, only a critical failure would make my hero miss.
4th edition did something really weird where they said, okay, look, we are not a war game anymore. We are a tactical combat game.
Yeah.
And because D&D is based on a war game, and it has a lot of these weird things like the to hit chance.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exactly make sense in person-to-person combat. It's like all or nothing, and it's kind of weird. But what 4th edition didn't do is they weren't brave enough, I don't think. They said, okay, all weapons now do 6 plus d6 damage. So you're guaranteed to whittle people down, and you hit almost every time. But I think what they should have done instead is just said, if you attack, you hit, and it does 1d6 plus d6 damage or something like that. And they should, or I think d6 plus 6 is kind of weird. I think it should be like 3 plus d6, something like that, if they really want it to be consistent. But the problem with 3rd is that enemies have 1 billion HP.
We played 3.5.
Yeah. Well, that was supposed to be improved on 3rd.
Yeah, that was 3.5 is what we played.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can imagine what 3rd was like.
Yeah, I don't know if 3rd the problem was different, but in 3.5, it's definitely enemies are damage sponges.
Yeah, 5th edition really tried to do a hard correct on 3rd edition and 4th edition.
4th edition isn't actually bad exactly, it's just a different game.
Yeah, well, so the 5th edition, though, well, a lot of people don't quite understand, like, combat lasts 3 turns, actually. Maybe a big combat lasts 5 turns. And it's designed to be like that. If your combat is lasting longer than 3 to 5 turns, you're doing something wrong. That's why boss monsters in 5th edition, they added this new thing to them, which is they have these
legendary actions. Those are really cool.
They get to take action in between the hero's turns. And some people's like, oh, that's action economy. Because if you have one big monster, then it gets to go once, and then all the heroes pile on. So you need to give it turns in between their turns, because having a big monster and a bunch of minions is kind of like annoying to manage, and you just want it to be one big epic fight.
But it's so they didn't have to give it 1,000 HP and let it last for like 10
Even
turns.
1,000 HP, when we were in the late levels of 5th edition, we would fight these boss monsters that would have 400 HP. And our party would deal out over 100 damage per turn. Like, some of the individual party members could deal over 80 damage by themselves, and that wasn't their big thing. Like, late game D&D is broken, and we are definitely abusing how broken it is, but even mid game D&D, like, so I think that's when it was the funnest strategic wise for us, was when we were sitting around level 10. So there's these fights which is like, it's a big scary monster, and it has the potential to kill us, and it has these legendary actions, but the damage being dealt is we will deal damage in 3 to 5 turns, enough to kill it, and this big monster, to account for that, has to be able to kill one of us each round of combat. That's what its legendary actions accomplish, is has the potential to take one of us down every single round.
I'm just thinking, so Zero Edition, right?
Yeah.
High level characters, let's say they all get to strength 18 from finding books and magic and whatever else. So they're going to be doing +3 damage, and weapons in Zero Edition do 1d6 damage.
Yeah.
So you're going to be averaging 6.5 damage per hit, but you don't hit every turn. So you can say you're maybe averaging like 5.5 damage or something.
Yeah.
A party has 4 to 6 people, so let's say you have 6 people. So you're looking at about 30 damage per round.
Yeah.
At a high level party in Zero Edition.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an inflation there.
Oh, well, also...
Well, unless you discount, like, you know, a wizard's going to come in and do like 100.
Here's one of the shames of 5th edition. It's interesting, but it's also a shame. Which is they realized that most adventures take place between level 1 and level 5. Long adventures, really big ones, take place between level 1 and level 9. And so they account for that. So between level 1 and level 9 is really balanced. There's a good progression, the leveling gets quite a bit harder, fighting enemies, it's all balanced. Then from level 10 to level 12 is like, let's throw some insane stuff in here, make you like a big power boost. It's still balanced within the game, but it's not as tight as the rest of it. 13 and onwards, they're just like, let's give them that, let's do that. Oh yeah, this spell was from that edition, so let's keep that in and have it working. And it just amps up all the way until you get to level 17, which is where you get the 9th level spells with Wish, when the game just breaks. Because Wish is, you can cast any spell up. There is so many insane spells, so many insane things. One of our party members, we basically broke the campaign we were playing because it's a module, which is he at, I think it's level 12 you get, cast the spell Magic Jar. And Magic Jar lets an evil wizard put his soul inside his jar, and his body basically collapses and ragdolls.
Isn't that like a 4th level spell or something?
It's higher.
Okay.
It's higher. And then what you do is, if there's a humanoid target, you take your soul, you attack their charisma, you go into them, and if you succeed, you basically get their body. Now, he played a kind of wizard, which at the start of every day, he gets to roll 2 dice. And he gets to keep those dice rolls, and he can use them at any point, and he can just do that. Even in the jar form, you're not able to cast spells, but he still has access to this ability. And he can infect anyone's roll with it, allies, enemies. They get 1 charisma saving throw against the wizard possessing them. And so if he rolls a 1, then that's the roll you get for a save, and then he succeeds, and he takes over your body. And so what he did is we encountered a dark elf mage. So he possessed her, and then he had access to his spell pool, access to her spell pool, and her HP pool got put on top of his own. So that's already absurd. We continue playing, and we encounter one of the strongest humanoid enemies in the game. It has some of the best stats, has some of the best damage per minute. And is this really janky setup, but basically we cast the spell Force Cage on her, so she can't escape. And then we do a bunch of curses on her, so the stats of this super powerful thing basically drop. Then we exit the body that I had possessed, and he uses Magic Jar, and he possesses her. And when the balance breaks is... So D&D's balance is you take challenge rating, you take your party's level, and you divide the... if you have 4 party members, you add together and you divide by 4. That's how it works. So you add the party's level together and you divide by 4. And that's how challenge rating works. So a challenge rating 15 monster, hypothetically, should be against 4 party members of 15th level. It doesn't work like that at the later levels, but at the early levels, that's definitely how it works.
Well, it's meant to be a guideline.
Yeah, it's a guideline.
If your party's doing too well, then you bump it up a bit.
Yeah,
and if it's doing...
So thinking of that guideline, he possessed a challenge rating 16 enemy, took it over. And so we had a challenge rating 16 monster with a wizard inside it that had access to all the spells. running about. So he could cast all of his spells, he could use its abilities. It's a fighter, so you have a wizard fighter without having to sacrifice multi-class. So it gets 3 attacks. Each attack deals like 1d6 plus 4d8 psychic damage.
Well, that's where the DM brings in like a challenge rating 30 party
But
or
because
something.
we were running a module and just going through the module, this is all available within the module.
And was the module like...
It's Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It is an adapted module, so it was for older edition. They just tried to adapt it up. But basically, after that happened, the whole dungeon broke because we had this ridiculously powerful wizard fighter multi-class that was unstoppable.
So, now the Dungeon of the Mad Mage was possibly Arneson or Gygax's thing back in the day.
I think it was Arneson.
And it wasn't the same as the... what was the other one called? The
Tomb of Horrors.
Tomb of Horrors, yeah. So it's not as dangerous as the Tomb of Horrors, right?
No, Tomb of Horrors, your party's meant to level up twice. Dungeon of the Mad Mage is you start at level 1 and you go to level 20.
Well, I thought the Tomb of Horrors was meant to kill you, basically.
It is. We've played the Tomb of Horrors, and so one of the initial starting traps is you're trying to figure out how to get further into the Tomb of Horrors. That's the whole idea. And so you end up at this mountainside, and there's a whole bunch of different doors that are potentially the entrance. And if you get it wrong, basically each one of them is an instant kill. Like one of them is walls start crushing you, and there's slow traps in there, so you slowly have to move out. And so before you even get into the dungeon, one of your party members might be dead. Then when you get into it, there is a magic gate. And you see this gate, and you can detect it's magic, but it's like, oh, that's a suspicious gate. And it's like a portal. If you step through it, it teleports you into a different room, strips you of your inventory, and changes your gender. And so you basically lose any items you have. You're teleported to a random location, and your identity is changed. And then there's another trap, which is if you interact with it, it instantly kills you. There's no death save. If you walk through this gate, you die. There's another one, if you step through it, you're teleported into a pit, and you fall and you hit the ground, and then you can't get out of the pit, and you basically wait there until you starve to death. So it's very unfair, nasty, instant traps, whereas Dungeon of the Mad Mage is you go down to the dungeon. How you're supposed to play is you go down to the dungeon, you clear a floor, you climb back up, because if you spend too long in it, you go insane. Then you go back down. There's new denizens on that floor that you cleared out. They're not as strong as the old ones. You have to fight their way through them, get to the next floor.
That's the one with the politics, isn't it?
Yeah. Climb back up. And so you keep going down. But 5th edition, basically, a lot of DMs, including ours, chose to not do. You have to fight through a new floor again each time because it really slows the whole process down. And it's also full of magic gates which allow you to teleport in between floors if you're at the right level.
So there's I was thinking this before, but then you said that.
Each time you use one of the gates, the first time you activate it, you don't know where it's going to go. It has a specific requirement. It's a puzzle to activate each one. And the first time you do it, you draw a card, and you roll. It's a 50-50 if you get a boon or a curse. The boons are okay. The curses are you lose all your money, or you every hit deals double damage against you.
But before we go on, there's all these little annoyances and weirdnesses and sticking points in earlier D&D. So there's max level, where different races have different max levels.
Yeah.
And like dwarves can't go above level 9, or maybe even level 7, I can't remember. And the only race that can actually level up forever is humans. And even then, the rule book doesn't go past level like 9 or 12 or something like that. And like you said, you do the Dungeon of the Mad Mage the proper way, and it's really slow.
Yeah.
Those roadblocks and inconveniences, those annoyances that you're like, this game would be so much better if they weren't here, right? They often actually serve a purpose, even if the player doesn't realize it. So, for example,
I advocate for us to keep doing that.
I'm not saying you did wrong or right. I'm just... It's a broader idea.
Yeah.
You look at like Breath of the Wild, where a lot of people didn't like how the items broke, and you say, okay, let's say the items don't break. You climb up the tower in that sort of bubbling tar pit. You go on top of the skull. You grab the royal broadsword. You now have the second best weapon in the game, and every fight is easy.
Yeah. You don't stop using it.
You don't stop using it, and it's all you use for the rest of the game. And now that can work if it's a 30-hour game, maybe. But it's meant to be much bigger than that. And it's meant to be much more exploratory. Like, okay, now I've got to use the spear, now I've got to use this. So people say, okay, what about repairing items? and then it's a formality, right? It breaks, you go to this. Then it's just a time
Yeah.
sink.
That's The Witcher.
Yeah, and The Witcher,
You have repair kits, and then you run out of the repair kits, and then
and you go to town and you repair it. The Witcher, I really don't get why they added item durability at all. Like, there's very few times where you make a choice like, okay, I'm this far into this dungeon, my sword just broke. Like, if the durability was like, this sword is good for 20 hits, and then you're going into a witch's lair, and because it's weird actually. Witcher 3, I think The Witcher 1 actually made this work slightly, but The Witcher 3, you can see like they kind of wanted you to have to plan ahead. Like, you sharpen your sword, and then there's a time limit. You put oil on your blade, and it's only good for a few hits. You take a potion, it only lasts for so long. But then they do stuff like you can pause combat and oil your blade at any point.
yeah,
And they do stuff like your potions, you just meditate and they refresh perfectly. And also, you say, okay, so there's mods that make it like, okay, you can't pause combat and oil your blade, and your swords break faster. I don't know if there's mods like that, but I'm sure there could be very easily. And so, okay, so it fixes it. No, because the fundamental design of The Witcher didn't let you scout ahead. There's like one or two missions where it's like, okay, so there's dust here, which means it's probably a ghost, and now, based on the time of day the citizens said they're going to attack, I'll go and interview them. Okay, it's this kind of ghost, so I want to get this oil ready, and this. If they'd made every monster like that, the whole game would have worked a lot better.
For me, when I played it, there was 2 encounters like that, like you said.
There's the tutorial counter by the well,
Yeah.
and then there's the Tower of Rats.
There's a different
Tower of Mice,
encounter,
sorry.
which is you stalk a monster slowly, and then Geralt basically you figure out what kind of creature it is, and Geralt basically gives you the slight summary of what it is, and then you can go look at the codex. And so it's like this giant badger mole creature, and that was a really interesting one because I like, all right, it's this, and I prepared for it and I fought it, and it's like, wow, I needed to do that preparation for this fight, and it was a bit of a detective work.
There's a werewolf actually that you have to be quite prepared for,
Yeah.
depending on your level. If that's another issue is the first game he lost his memory, but the third game they really shouldn't be making him get better in most ways. Like maybe his
gear could get stronger.
yeah, but even then it should be mostly you're acquiring knowledge or something,
Yeah.
and or recipes, ingredients, that sort of thing. Because, well, it is also weird that there's like a billion crafting items in the game, but you make an item and it's good forever. Like you make a potion, you're done. You make a sword, you're done. It doesn't feel cohesive. So going back to the idea of you get rid of, you sound out these little annoyances. So like with The Witcher, you make weapons break faster, and you're like, there, it's so much better. And it's like, well, the rest of the game wasn't built around that, so it doesn't.
Yeah.
It kind of falls apart. And with D&D, like I don't like the level limits on dwarves and stuff. It feels bad. The thing is, you're never going to get to level 9 anyways, but it feels bad.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm stunting myself. It's a bad investment. But I think what those roadblocks can do, they're sort of an anchor in I don't know what you call that, sales terminology, where it says this is the expectation of the game. So if I'm a designer looking at this game, I'm not going to make a system that is going to leave behind the dwarves and you need to be level 30 to get through, and therefore the whole game actually doesn't spiral out of control. Like there was this, and what was it called? The encyclopedia or the Gygax made it. It made you go up to level 30, and it's some people love it, but it's just ridiculous. It's like what you're talking about. It just gets out of hand like crazy.
Yeah, I didn't even get to the high level spells because that's just, it gets to what can I do. So polymorph at level 17, you get, what it lets you do is you cast polymorph on yourself. You turn yourself into a young gold dragon or an adult gold dragon. I think it's a young gold dragon. Gold dragons, so polymorph, after 24 hours the spell's permanent on you. You have this giant HP pool, you're a dragon. The gold dragon also has this ability, which is they can shapeshift into humanoids. The restriction on that is it has to be a humanoid equal to their challenge rating, and it can't use class abilities. So class abilities is if any class has that ability, you can't use it. So you can't do any spell casting with it. But there are so many things that you could turn into with this gold dragon. It just completely breaks everything. It's cool though. It's cool. But I was like, I'm going to turn into the shadow elf, and now I can like send out this wave of sadness and make everyone sleepy, and then I'll turn into a wizard and use a special ability which causes an explosion. Then I'll turn into a warlock that can create portals, and it's cool. But when you're doing a pre-built dungeon and 2 of your party members have turned into gold dragons, and the dungeon was a rough adaptation of a first or second edition dungeon, it really breaks down. It really, really breaks down.
Yes. So trying to bring it back to the point where I was talking about my my D6 system for D&D and fighting. So moving towards that, the until second edition, and I think they kind of kept it in as a sort of appendix, like a vestigial organ throughout the games. I think even fifth edition has it, was the stronghold. And the idea was that you have this place that you build up and your heroes retire into around level 9. And then they send your new heroes out on adventures for them.
Yeah, well, age on that's interesting with that retirement, because dwarves live longer than humans. And so they're enemies that age you, but like travel time, you spend a year traveling to the location and then a year traveling back. And your fighter is like getting old, but your dwarf is aging along with him. But so your fighter is like, oh, I'm level 7 now, fighter. I'm an old man, I can't keep fighting. Whereas the dwarf's like, I'm level 7, I'm going max at level 9. I can keep on fighting as a dwarf. And then...
Yeah, the humans weren't getting to level 9.
Yeah.
And also everything was a lot deadlier, so you were dying a lot more.
Yeah.
And
but I'm saying even without that deadlier, it's like the human won't get to level 9 because they'll be too old.
But the... And this is all based around, like, I really think Keep on the Borderlands should be in every single...
It should be the base module?
It shouldn't even be the base module. It should be the first thing you see in, like, the player's handbook or something, or in the DM's guide.
It should be in the Dungeon Master's Guide, do this.
It should be part of the rules. Like, You're like, okay, so you want to play D&D? Like, you don't even have the rules, like, make your characters do that. Instead, you say, Keep on the Borderlands. Because Keep on the Borderlands makes the entire game work. Because what it is it gives you your stronghold that you will eventually inherit right off the bat. It gives you a base which you would venture out from, which has quest givers in, but not too many. And it gives you multiple dungeons in the space. And, like, directly in the space, there's, like, a catacombs beneath the church, I think it is. And so there's that right there. It gives you an idea of how NPCs interact and can betray you. Famously, the priest betrays you. Spoilers.
I didn't know that.
Well, if you're running the module and as the DM, make it the mayor that betrays the players. Like, it's the thing of don't give a player a fireball because they can look it up in the handbook. Give them an ice bolt. And don't just slap a coat of paint on and say it's an ice bolt. If they're like, I extinguish the fire with my ice bolt, you're like, well, it actually makes it burn brighter because it's just called an ice bolt, but it's fire. And they'll be like, oh, hey, yeah, the fire's out.
Yeah.
Just mix it up a bit for them. If you want. You don't have to, obviously, because there's some solid stuff there. And again, changing things. This is why modding is actually a lot harder than you might think. Like, in terms of not making a mod, just, oh, I really like, let's say, Duck Game. I'm going to add this mod to it that adds all these really cool items. So there was a core that was balanced with itself, and until you really understand why each decision was made, you don't want to go messing with that too much. I mean...
I get that with indie games. I downloaded a lot of games from Agar, whatever the IO site is. Itch.io. And there's a lot of RPG Maker games that I downloaded. It's like, oh, this could be interesting. I play them for like half an hour a lot of times. Have these people played video games? Do they not understand what is fun in a video game? It's like, why aren't you writing a book instead of making a video game here? So you played this video game on your Game Boy Color when you were a kid. And so this mini game now has to be a core feature in this video game, and it's terrible.
So RPG Maker was based on Final Fantasy IV, I think. Yeah. If you look at Final Fantasy I, it's a JRPG. Yeah. In combat, if you attack an enemy that dies before you hit them, you don't attack anything. Your attack is wasted. And it's really annoying, and it sucks. And so from, I think, Final Fantasy III and onwards, I think it was, possibly, they made it so that if you attack and there's no one there, you just attack the next enemy in the line. And you think, okay, yeah, because it's just a little quality of life feature. It doesn't really change anything. It takes away one of the very few tactical options that actually exist in a JRPG. Because what that option was, it was one of the few decisions you actually had to make where it was a question of, am I feeling lucky? Am I going to push my luck? Is it better to do an attack that does 20 damage to everyone or 100 damage to one person who might die before I hit them?
Yeah. And
so there was a decision to be made. And most JRPGs became, for a while, the combat became more of a measure of how strong your character was. So you could fight a combat and you'd be like, oh wow, this used to be such a hard fight for this party now. And if you like that experience, you like that experience. That is maybe the best like steel man I can give for JRPGs. Is that what people enjoy? Like when you read a book, they don't often have a section where the characters go back and fight something they already fought, and you can see how much they've changed.
There's kind of one version
without it
of
being
that.
done very poorly.
Yeah, they're done being poorly is that they get bullied, they get the powers of their destiny, and then they beat up the bully.
Right.
And that's the Spider-Man trope of there's Jake the jock who beats up Peter Parker. Parker gets bit by the spider, and then he can defend himself against Jake the jock.
Well, that's the hero's journey in a way. It's you go back and defeat the evil uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think the difference there is it's not your nemesis.
Yeah.
It's walking from... It's more like this, actually, let's say. Walking from town A to town B now takes half as long and is half as risky. And you don't often... Like, the Lord of the Rings example wouldn't be when the hobbits come back and defeat Saruman, right? Because that's sort of overthrowing the bully. But it would actually be more like, in Lord of the Rings, if they had a section devoted to how they got from... they went through the Mines of Moria in reverse, and it took them half as long because they were all like twice as good fighters now after having drunk in the Ent
gain more
water.
confidence in themselves. And
And it's like there's the cave troll they take down in like half a second, and that would be more the feeling that you get. It'd be like this journey that took them like 3 months or whatever it was now takes them a month, and
they're
like light. What are they called? Lit RPGs.
Yeah.
Even they don't really do that because it's not that interesting to read the damage. Like, oh, I did twice as much damage. And...
You know, that cartoonist, he has like the very marshmallowy men, and has a lot of like RPG or video game stuff. Anyways,
there's a lot of cartoonists like that.
He's an animator, but one of his ones is like, I'm finally level 99. I'm gonna go back to Zone 1 and beat everything up. And he goes back there, it's like swings his sword once, instantly think that, well, I'm bored now.
Yeah. So the JRPGs had this aspect of pushing your luck and dungeon crawling back in Final Fantasy, and now they don't. And that's one of those things where people threw out this thing that they're like...
The pushing your luck was the whole thing of the Mad Mage. The actual idea is how far can we get this exposition, and how much treasure can we take back out again? And that was it every single time. Was how much can I push our luck? Can we do... Because when you sleep there, every time you sleep, you have a chance of going insane. And it gets worse and worse the further you're in the dungeon and the longer you're there.
You know what's funny? There's this very popular multiplayer genre, but there's also single-player variants of it now called extraction shooters.
Yeah.
Warframe, Escape from Tarkov. The idea is that...
Lethal Company.
Lethal Company.
It's not an extraction shooter, but it's an extraction collector.
So the idea is that you go in with a persistent character into a randomly generated world, and you go by yourself or with your friends. You get as much loot and levels as you can, and you can keep going or you can leave at any point, and you keep whatever you take, but if you die, it's gone. Or sometimes your gear drops and another player can come along and take it.
So Lethal Company basically cut out the middleman of shooting, and it's just a looter of you go into incredibly deadly situations. You try to get as much money as you can and get out again, and your motivation is you have to pay a higher and higher amount of price to keep playing, and then your group, if you don't have enough money, you all die.
So they... Yeah, and Lethal Company is an evolution. There was, what's it called? Darker and Darker? That dungeon crawling one?
Yeah.
So people are like, wow, this is like Escape from Tarkov, but, fantasy. And there's, I guess Deep Rock Galactic is kind of like that in a way.
It's kind of one of the first forms of that.
Well, that's the dungeon crawling genre.
Yeah, that is what it's talking about with the Mad Mage, is that game of how much can we push ourselves.
The dungeon crawler was all about doing that. It was about going, like, you look at Angband, and in Angband, you keep descending to Angband, then you come back up, and you sell your stuff in town, and you go back down.
Well, I was thinking about...
But if you take away the things that, like, oh, to save time, we're going to do this. Okay, so keep it on my path, if I may.
Yeah.
The point I'm very slowly getting to is that D&D wasn't about leveling up.
Yeah.
You weren't meant to really... you were meant to die, and it wasn't meant to be a bad thing. It was meant to be part of... The story was the world.
Yeah, well, it was a war game, and they had heroes because it's cool to have a hero. But then they wanted to play with the heroes more than just fighting the war, and so that's what it was.
Yeah, and they were actually it was I think I talked about this on the podcast before. Possibly Arneson ran the first ever D&D game, and so what the idea was, it was Blackhawk, I think, or no, not Black. Black
Greyhawk is
Gygax's.
Yeah.
His was called Blackstone Keep or something, maybe.
Griffin. I thought I had Griffin.
I thought it had Black. Anyways, the players had to descend into the keep, and it was a dungeon crawler again. Yeah. So you go in, you grab loot, you get out, you use it to pay your armies, and you can hire new mercenaries, and you
find some magic items.
And so the whole point was that you were reinforcing your armies by delving into the dungeon. The players were so obsessed with the dungeon crawling aspect that Arneson threw up his hands at one point and said, okay, your army's all lost because you haven't gone and resupplied them in like 4 months. They're all dead.
What could be cool is if it's competitive, so you're fighting each other's armies, the armies could be fighting secure dungeons to delve into, so your heroes can get more resources for the armies. And so there's better and better dungeons, so you're fighting to secure dungeons to loot.
The world that would exist where it would be worth using an army to secure...
There's actually an anime, I won't go into it, but there's an anime that follows that plot line, which is...
But I'm just, okay, real world, right?
Yeah.
A place full of treasure. You have, like, the Aztec temples.
Yeah.
You have... That's it. That's all I can think of.
The Attila the Hun's tomb?
I guess, like, maybe some of the Chinese emperors.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're like, okay, this is... there was actually a Jackie Chan movie about the Chinese general transporting his treasury after he seceded from the throne, and he died in the mountains between China and India.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are places like that. Galleons sunken into the sea.
Yeah.
So what you have is... I read a book where they talked about this, actually. This guy has the power to teleport anywhere on Earth. And he's like, okay, how do I make money with this? He's like, I know, I'll just go to, he's like, is there, like, just treasure sunken into the ocean? And he looked at, like, if there's treasure everywhere, why haven't people just gone and gotten it, right? And so he researched it, and he's like, oh, because the cost of extracting the treasure from the ocean is more, because you have to find it, and then you have to get it out. And it's more than the amount of treasure you get, almost always. And the people that do that for a living, they're living on a thin margin. Yeah. It's like, okay, this $10,000 expedition netted us $15,000. Now we have to set out next to...
And they do it because they're insane adventure seekers.
Yeah, they're having fun. And they're not quite always getting by with it.
Yeah.
And so on Earth, I'm just imagining, like, they just, okay, a Spanish galleon sunk here in the 18th century. Bring the Navy around. We're securing this location so our divers can go in there. And then it's, so like the Americans send the American Navy, and the Chinese like, no, send the Chinese Navy. It's like, how many millions of dollars a day does an aircraft carrier take to operate?
Yeah.
It's like, we did it. We've got 10 pounds of gold. Put it on the aircraft carrier.
Well, I think part of that scale of my thought is it has to be a world that has stagnated into the medieval age, and there's wizards who can literally generate gold with their hands and, like, food items. And so if you go into this dungeon where this wizard, like, basically created resources and get that, then that's worthwhile.
Well, there are locations on Earth that are worth fighting over, but they tend to be like iron mines and like fields and
oil patches.
Yeah, and like, you know, like fertile soil, like the Rhineland or something. So, not the Rhineland, the Alsace-Lorraine, sorry.
Yeah.
Or Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So there is that aspect, but those are much bigger sort of operations. I did read it was a lit RPG again, where the main character, she goes to another world, and they're talking about, we need to get our army to secure this iron mine, and she's like, this is an ancient dwarven iron mine? She's like, yeah, wouldn't it be all mined out? But no, iron regrows. What?
Yeah, the anime is, there's no natural food that grows in the world. If you kill monsters, they basically turn into food, and so everyone goes to the dungeon to get food.
But who made the dungeon?
It's just how the world works. They appear.
Yeah, and that is a thing you can do. You can have a world appear, but I've actually seen quite a few new, like, indie RPGs actually use the idea of a dungeon just appearing or growing, and a few lit RPGs do this as well. And there's this whole genre of book called Dungeon Core, which is about cores that grow dungeons.
What's interesting is the Dungeon of the Mad Mage is underneath the mountain, which the dwarves in Mellorcan originally mined. However, The Undermountain is what it's called. It drives people insane, makes them seek power, which is underneath the mountain, and it draws evil creatures to them and makes them draw evil creatures to them. So the Dungeon of the Mad Mage's actual story is the mountain drives you insane, and it makes things come into it. So it's the original dungeon because there's a dungeon here.
Well, I think the theory behind most of D&D's dungeons, the treasure comes from dead adventurers, I think is where...
Well, so that's the whole thing, is there was a knot in the weave, is what it is. And so the dwarves went there because there's mithril to be mined. They made a bunch of tunnels, and then monsters like, oh, I could deal with that. And so they went in there, killed all the dwarves. Hey, did you hear there was like a bunch of dead dwarves in there that had a ton of mithril? So adventurers went in, they all die, and then this mage shows up and is like, huh, this is a cool spot, and he starts living there. He gets driven insane because he gets very powerful from being in the mountain, but it drives you mad. And so in his madness, he creates a dungeon.
Yeah, and people come...
And then people come to this dungeon because it's full of treasure that this mad mage... He's bringing people in there to die. That's how he makes his money, is he has people
and
in there.
That is actually Slaves to Armagh 2's entire existence.
Yes.
Because what happened was they made Slaves to Armagh 1, which is this is Dwarf Fortress, but Slaves to Armagh 1 was not Dwarf Fortress. And what Tarnanzak did was they had this fighting game where you're an adventurer. It's a 3D game. You can download it from their website. You're an adventurer, you walk, it's kind of like Skyrim or something, but when you get into a fight, you can target like fingers and arms, and you can like bite someone's leg off, and you see it all in 3D, like you actually tear off their leg and stuff. And they had this very complex fighting system, and they wanted to have dungeons you could go through, rather than it just being this sort of open world alpha test thing. And so they said, okay, let's make it'd be really cool, is if the player made the dungeon through gameplay, because the gameplay incentivized them to make a dungeon, and then after you lose the dungeon, it becomes abandoned, monsters move in, and then you play as an adventurer that goes and tries to get the treasure that they all accumulated in there. And they're, okay, how do we do this? It's like, well, dwarves love hoarding gold and they love digging, so it'll be a game about dwarves. And so the whole point of Dwarf Fortress was actually the only mode that exists on Steam right now, and the most popular mode, the
Call the Imaginement.
The Fort mode, is actually meant to be the precursor to Adventure mode. Where so you're supposed to play, lose, and then start an adventure, and you can do this now, not on Steam, but if you go onto the website, you can do this, and then you go down into it. But the scope of the game is ridiculous, so they haven't gotten around to implementing like half the systems yet. They're on version 0.3 or 0.4 right now. Like it's ridiculous. But okay, so leveling up was never meant to be the point.
Yeah.
It was meant to be about, like you said, extraction. You go in, you go out. You go in, you go out. And so, just speeding up the gameplay is kind of an odd thing to say, because you're actually saying, I want to play less of this game. That's the problem with streamlining, right?
Yeah.
You can like if you streamline Skyrim enough, you press. It's like, hey, looks like you were caught crossing over the border. You hit your head on Olduvine and killed him. Yeah. Thank you. You have saved us all.
Well, it's something else on that streamline is back Dungeon Mad Mage with leveling. There's two different ways to do it, which is you kill things, you get experience, or every time you go down 2 floors, you level up. That's the basic formula. Like earlier, it's a few more floors, and later on, it's like each 1 floor you go through, you level up. If you play it with XP, if you clear every floor, you'll hit level 20 by the 15th floor out of 20. And so there's this whole thing of the question in D&D of milestones versus XP. And so there's original intent, you get XP and that's how you level up. Whereas a DM could choose to basically not have their party level up. They're like at level 5, and they have done enough to be at level 30, hypothetically. But the DM's keeping them at level 5 until they're worthy of leveling up, because this story or the world is for level 5, and it's not about the levels. That's the milestone. So,
or here's another little annoying quibble that doesn't make any sense, so we got rid of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you encourage the players to go in and out without this arbitrary weird limitation, right? Yeah. Well, what if okay, here's a crazy idea, okay? There's treasure in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, obviously. What if you got XP from gold, but only if you took the gold to the surface? I mean, that would be a crazy, stupid idea, right? But it might work. Oh, wait, no, that was the rules.
Yeah, actually, it's even further than that. The dungeon is designed that the players can never find the bag of holding. In Mad Mage, the town won't sell it. There's no bags of holding in the dungeon. There's no pourable holes. And also pack animals refuse to go into the mountain. They go insane if they go into it. So that's actually even meant to be a further thing about the mountain.
Yeah, the mountain is meant to kick you out over and over and over again.
Your party can only carry out what they can carry out on their backs.
Which is how I've designed every dungeon in First Heroes, actually. Is that the dungeon itself... it's not that the dungeons are like exactly sentient beings like that grow in the world, like you're saying, the anime. Yeah. It's just... You have enough ill intent in a region, and...
That's the Mad Mage's mountain.
Yeah, it wants you gone. It wants you dead. And so... I added, there's food in my game, there's light, so you go down, you run out of light, you have to go back to town. You want treasure to level you up, you have to go out of town. You don't want the dungeon to start doing completely unfair things to you. Like, I think one of my events is if you wander into a dark space, you just lose control of your hero forever.
Yeah, well,
then you leave. And now I've also added, there's things called Banes, where if you roll a 6, so whenever you roll for an encounter, on a 1 you have an encounter. If you roll a 6, what happens instead is you get a number of Banes equal to the floor you're on. If you don't resolve the Banes before you go to the next floor, then the dungeon's hatred increases at a ridiculous rate, which means you have to either fight a really strong fight, you have to make the dungeon hate you completely and suddenly rocks start raining from the ceiling and killing you, or you have to leave.
Well, so another interesting thing about the comparison of 5e with First Edition, the dungeons originally made in, is there is dark vision bloat in 5th edition. Like basically every single race but humans has dark vision, humans and halflings.
Well, even in 1st edition there was a problem where, well, there was still a lot of people with dark vision, but also it wasn't meant to be night vision, it was meant to be like infrared.
Yeah.
And so you're meant to have a vague idea of the outline of foes that have hot blood. You're not meant to be able to see in the dark in a lot of the cases.
And so the mountain is always dark. Like, there's very few floors with light. However, when we played it, we had a warlock who had the night vision of the warlock. We had a dark elf who can see in the dark. We had a dwarf. And then our wizard had a magic helmet that gave him night vision.
Well, in 5th edition, you also start with an ever-burning torch.
No, that's 3.5.
Oh, is that 3.5?
Yeah, 3.5. But the mountain is meant to be very dark and very hard to imagine. And so what's funny is one of the heroes I originally started playing with didn't have night vision, and he wielded a halberd. So you can't hold a torch and your halberd at the same time. And so whenever combat started, before we had a magic item that gave us light, is basically like scream at the wizard, like cast light on me so I can
So that's
fight.
another thing. Spells were a real pain in 1st edition. Like, you never wanted to use them.
Yeah.
And when people they talk about like, oh, wizards scale quadratically and fighters scale linearly, so it's not fair. And so they tried to buff fighters a bunch. Yeah. The thing was, the wizards scaled, if they're using their spells, all their spells every fight.
Yeah.
But what a wizard was going to do is they're going to use their sling 99% of the time and then go to sleep without ever using their spell because they're saving it for the moment when they needed it, and they never... Yeah. They're going to let people die because they're waiting for that right moment. Because, well, only one person died. And the other thing is, in Chainmail, I don't know if this carried on to 0 edition, you couldn't use a torch underground in a lot of situations because it would extinguish itself. Yeah. You had to use an oil lantern or something else.
There's I remember reading in one of the Dragon magazines about having a wizard who doesn't have damage spells is one of the best things you can do. Because they'll just cast enchantments that will last on your party for like 8 hours. And so if you're going to the dungeon in Dragon magazine for, I guess, early editions, he's going to cast light on your fighter's weapon, so you have light, you don't have to carry torches, that's really nice. Then he's going to cast like swift feet so your party can move through the dungeon faster, and then he's going to cast silence so they don't make noise while they're traveling. And so all these things are balancing so that your party has advantages and your wizard's actually using his spells because he's not just going to like not cast a fireball.
One of my favorite moments in Labyrinth Lord, well, I think it's my favorite moment, was when we fought the corpse hugger thing, whatever it was called.
Yeah.
The corpse coffer, whatever it was, where
coughing corpse.
We couldn't beat it. So how did the plan work? We decided that we would cast light on its eyes so that it couldn't see. And then your character had to close his eyes to not be blinded or something. And so you guys were like blindly hitting each other just to prevent it from moving.
Yes.
And hoping that you wouldn't die before the cleric was able to turn it. And that was the only plan.
Attempting to turn it.
But it was like a level above him, so he couldn't... So it was like 5 turns of just, okay, fighter, just hold on. Well, dwarf, actually. Yeah. Come on, dwarf, don't die another turn against this blinded coffer. just so.
Yeah, and then the coffer was ejected, and then we could collect the treasure and run away.
And we couldn't even kill it. We just had to kick it out of the room and grab its treasure and leave. But we got all the experience we would have because we kicked it out of the room.
My favorite moment is how we beat all the mites.
With, like, just throwing fire on the ground?
Um,
Or you mean, like, the weird
we
pole
closed
system?
the door on them and drowned them.
Oh, because there was the time we used the flaming oil to... we opened a door that was 30 feet away with a series of poles and ropes.
No, there's the closet full of mites, and there's also, like, waist-deep water. And so we basically...
You have to be more specific. There's a lot of closets full of water for some reason.
It was the one with mites in it, though.
Because there's the kobold one where they were neutral. They're just like, close the door.
Yeah, so...
Come in. Close the door.
It was waist-deep water, and so that's when we looked up the height of mites, and we found out that they couldn't actually have it. So we had the fighter, it was Hadith. He closed the door with all the mites in there, and they couldn't properly fight him because they're drowning.
Right.
And so he's holding his torch and basically just whacking the mites on the head while they're drowning in this closet full of water.
So this is the weird thing. So I was talking about 4th edition they wanted to move away from the sort of war game thing.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, so you're talking about how 5th edition, you're not even playing the game. Like, you're casting Wish, you're doing this, you're doing that. There's a weird problem that 3.5 to 5th edition has, 1st edition and below has, and My First Heroes has, where there is a core system you're supposed to use in the game, right? Like the fighting, you roll the dice, you hit the thing. And it's the least effective way to get anything done.
Yes.
And on the one hand, it's kind of neat, but it does, like, 2nd edition is the only edition where fighting is actually you stand there, you hit, you take a hit, you stand there, you hit, you take a hit.
Well, even then, if you read AD&D, written by Gygax, he talks about fighting's not always the best option. Like, cutting down a tree and having it fall on them might work better, or like the whole old cliff boulder thing. That sort of
well, even in the examples in the player's handbook for 2nd edition, it's like step on the spiders. Don't try to hit them with your sword, just squish them.
Yeah.
And it kind of bothers me in a way, because the issue in my mind, right, is, okay, here's a very well-regulated, tested, tuned system.
Yeah.
And the DM's like, okay, I know, no matter what you do, I'm ready. Like, if you use the system. And then, okay, I step on the spider. And you're like, oh, I guess you squish it. Okay. And then, if that's a possibility, it takes a lot of mental power to actually engage with a rule set.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so as long as all my players keep using flaming flasks and spells and whatever weird magic items they find and whatever weird allies they find, I don't have to deal with the rules of the game. And then it becomes a burden every time. It's like, okay, we're gonna do normal combat. It's like, oh, okay, normal combat, and it sort of becomes that the appendix of D&D thereby becomes the entire game. And actually, 4th edition was like, okay, no, we're gonna make that front and center, right? But a thing that you could have done, which I guess you could argue a game like Exalt actually sort of had this moment of, you know what? We're chopping in half, we're chopping those sections off, and we're taking this big bloated rules and we're chucking the rules, and the only thing you can do is all the cool little finagling.
Well, or what Pathfinder did. You know what's really cool? Leveling up. Like, D&D's not about leveling up, but people love leveling up. So what Pathfinder did, you know what's cool is leveling up. You know what's cool? It's multi-classing. You know what's cool? Is having 500 different classes to pick from, trying them out, gaining their flashy ability, then multi-classing a different class, having that character die, making a new character with a bunch of new abilities. That's what Pathfinder was.
Yeah. And
it's like taking what people enjoy and coring it.
You know who... No, it doesn't really work. I was going to say... No, okay. You know who actually said, okay, look at the rules, but they didn't do the 4th edition of the rules control you, was Challenger. Because in Challenger, if you roll a 4+, you succeed, basically, is there on a 6-sided die. It's like, I cast a fireball. Okay, roll a die. If you have a skill.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of do whatever you want, but it also encourages you to engage with the game.
Well...
And I guess that's what Maze Rats is like in Knave. And...
Well, Call of Cthulhu is a little different as well. It uses the D100 system.
What's that game called? Everyone's John? Or where, like, you all take turns playing John?
Yeah, Everyone's John has a similar idea to Call of Cthulhu.
If you roll a 6, you succeed, or whatever?
So Call of Cthulhu is melee combat in the D100 system I hate. But the range combat I actually really like. So you have a gun skill. And so you roll under your gun skill, you hit. The players, I believe, you get to roll a dodge skill as well. And if you roll below what they hit with, you dodge. That's the idea. And so it's kind of like you could shoot a bullet at Cthulhu, and if you roll a 1, then Cthulhu has like an insane dodge skill. You'll still hit him with that roll of the 1. But the combat isn't the focus in Call of Cthulhu. It's more so this idea is like, all right, I want to investigate this area. So the DM's like, all right, roll me your spot hidden. And I have a spot hidden of 50, so I just have to roll below 50, and I'll spot what's hidden. And then DM's like, ooh, roll me a hard spot hidden. And so it's like, all right, I have a hard spot hidden of 30, so I roll below 30, and I spot what's
What's
hidden.
the Star Wars RPG's system called? Fate dice.
Yeah, that's the 100 system.
Well, but the fate dice are just good, bad. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not a number. Like, the Star Wars literally just has like a
Yeah.
good, double good, bad,
Okay.
double bad on their dice, and you
Yeah.
roll them, and it's like, okay, you got 2 bads and a good, so you succeed at what you do, but a guy comes in. It's like, it's actually a really elegant system. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to hotwire this car. It's like, okay, roll the dice. Okay, I got a major success and a minor failure. It's like, okay, you hotwire the car, you get in, and just as you're opening the door, someone walks in the room.
Yeah.
So what do you do now? It's like, okay, I slam on the gas and I spin around and turn out of there. Okay, that'll take 2 rolls. Give me, okay, first roll, major success. Second roll, minor failure. Okay, you spin around perfectly. You clip the door on your way out, so now your car is chugging along. Like, that feels good. It feels fast. It just goes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you the sort of it sounds weird, but there's something to logistics and bookkeeping that,
Yeah.
like the minutia that is.
Well, that's what the Call of Cthulhu gives you, is you have these numbers, and you have luck. One of my favorite things about Call of Cthulhu is you have a luck stack. And so your DM, well, let's say you have a luck of 80, and your DM says, all right, I need you to give me a luck roll. And so you roll your dice, and it's below 80, you're lucky. However, if you're, like, all right, I'm going to shoot my gun at the chandelier to make it fall. And you roll your die, and it's like, all right, my shooting is 60, and I rolled a 65. And so you can subtract your luck by 5 points, make that a 60. But then your DM's like, all right, I need you to roll me a luck roll. You roll your luck now. Your luck's worse because you've used it up. And so you can...
That's what Dungeon Crawl Classics, which you have only looked at the mutant version, I believe.
Yeah.
But Dungeon Crawl
I
Classics,
looked at a very small amount of the mutant version.
one of my favorite rules is, so they have like crazy, the spellcasting system is amazing. It's wild, it's crazy, you never know what you're going to cast next. It's really interesting. The clerical system, the gods are hard to please, you have to do all this weird stuff, very cool. Fighters, they have, it's a really cool idea. They have this ability called heroism. And what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to use heroism. And what you do is you say, okay, do something heroic. And so it's, okay, I'm going to jump, I'm going to swing on the chandelier, I'm going to kick the guy off, and I'm going to land. And then you have to roll against your heroism skill. And so it very much, it's like a stat reason to encourage just doing something crazy.
Yeah, well,
It's like, I drop down flat, I slash my sword out, and take out both the legs of the guys beside me.
so
Now, you can already do that in first edition.
yeah, 5th edition.
Turns that into a feat.
Well, no, so 2nd edition doesn't do that. 2nd edition got rid of that because what 2nd edition said is you're already doing all that in combat. So 2nd edition, like you said, is very much a fight. You're already doing all these creative things. So you have to be super creative to do that.
But in first edition, you can actually do that.
Yeah.
But
5th edition said, all right, this is a really cool idea. So we're going to make one fighter subclass, which has ability trip, and they have a heroic charge, and they have all these things. So they have this list of abilities that they have access to. And it's like, all right.
Now
so
the wizard
it's
can't do
added-
that.
Well, it's add rules. It's not even the wizard can't do that. It's only that fighter subclass can do it. So if you have a champion, he can't do that. Only the battlemaster can do that. And I made a variant rule of my own. I haven't tested it, but it's basically every martial class in the game has access to the fighters, the champions thing, but they can screw it up. The battlemaster is just really good at doing those things, but everyone else can do it. It's just they can screw it up, and that was the difference.
yeah.
And I consider even letting wizards do that, but I'm on the fence of that. But it's like every martial class is allowed to use this guy's things, and these are just base notes. Like you can do stuff beyond them. This is a champion or the fighter, whatever, is very good at them.
So one thing in our first edition that I've been very careful with is not adding feats to the game, because it's so easy to homebrew like Labyrinth Lord or first edition. It's really, really easy.
Yeah.
I think it's been easier than 5th edition or something, because 5th edition you can add feats and whatnot, but it's so easy in 5th edition.
Well, 5th edition you have a lot of comparisons for balance, and they're
Yeah.
all there, and there's more set rules.
But what I've tried very carefully to do is to remember anything you give to a character is actually something you've taken away from every other character that they could before do. So the fighters in 1st edition are basically, unless very late game, worse than dwarves in every way.
Yeah.
And so it's well, the problem isn't dwarves even, it's elves. Elves are the real problem, because an elf is as good as a fighter at fighting and as good as a mage at casting spells.
Yeah.
But
They're a
dwarves
little squishier.
dwarves are as good as a fighter at fighting. They're more resilient than a fighter against like poisons, and they're better than thieves at thieves skills, and they can sense the incline of the ground they're on, which I'm sure has a use somewhere.
If you're traveling up or down.
Yeah, which I have troubles thinking in game terms how you'd make that a feature of the game, because
It's
even if you're like, okay, I can guide us out, it's like, but your path will go up, and it's not like a dungeon is tilted perfectly downwards or something.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect downward spiral, unless you made your dungeons all perfect downward spirals, I guess.
Yeah.
And then dwarves are suddenly really useful in that aspect. So okay, how do we make a fighter better? So okay, they have the same THAC0 as monsters, which means they can hit as easily as monsters of the same level as them.
Yeah.
Which makes them better than anyone at fighting, but not significantly better, but better than anyone. And this, again, this is a little inconvenience, let's get rid of it. Maybe we ruined something somewhere, because fighters, of course, can get to level 12.
Yeah.
Dwarves can't. But
Didn't we also change the cleave skill for them?
we created the cleave skill.
Yeah.
But what we did was we said, okay, so we want to give them the ability to cleave, but what if the dwarf wants to cleave? So what we did was, okay, we'll make a cleave skill that anyone in the game can do. And what it means is you can choose to cleave at the start of your attack, and if you kill the thing you're attacking, you can go on and you can add the damage to the next thing you attack, but you have to roll to hit them as well.
Yeah.
However, if you decide to use cleave on your turn, you have to declare before you attack, and you have a -4 to hit on every single cleave roll. And so we added that skill to the game, and then we said fighters have no penalty to cleave.
Yeah.
And so they're always assumed to be doing cleave unless they say they're not. And so that's one way you can add feats. And so with 5th edition, like you said, what you could do is just say, all right, all the feats in the game, these are actually available to anyone at any time,
Yeah.
but only if you take it are you actually guaranteed to succeed.
Yeah.
And to everyone else, it's you could probably come up with a formula. It's a skill roll, and you have a -2 per level it is above you, and a -5 per class away it is from you. The range would be like fighter, thief, cleric, mage, or something like that. Or maybe fighter, thief, mage, and then clerics on a different side of, like cleric, fighter, thief, mage, something like that. Because thieves are slightly mages in at least the original D&D. I don't know if they kept that.
They kind of are still.
Because I think it's, the Grey Mouser. He was a wizard, so kind of keeps that in. So my rule, I guess, if you miss, that is what you need to hit next time.
Yeah.
And preferably against the same foe, like, if there's a goblin and a dragon, and well, actually, no, it doesn't really matter, does it? Like, you attack the dragon to get a guaranteed hit on the goblin. It's like, so.
And if you're trying to use the goblin to hit the dragon,
You'll just hit the goblin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it probably doesn't matter actually. Maybe per combat.
I'd be stored up,
but
I don't use them. I have 30 d20s from me. Oh, the final boss is gonna get wrecked.
Well, no, it instantly get replaced every time you miss. So it just gets better and better and better.
Yeah.
But so what you would do?
Yeah, but I made a homebrew class based off your homebrew system, which can store them and never use them. So he can just, for some reason, he just keeps missing. And then at one point, it's the drunken master subclass. So he just keeps on missing, and so he can just keep storing those.
So each miss is its own die that you can, and then you can activate them at whatever
and then
point.
suddenly, bow, chicka bow, he beats everything up because he's actually been setting up the fight. He's like, his stumble is actually saying something up, so he can like drop a pot on their head, and then he's like roll back is saying something up, and so right at the moment he's like pow 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 pow, and everything's taken out, and it's all his plan.
That's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, no, or it's like a mastermind doing that as well.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I really like is one of the worst things about being a rogue in 5th edition and a lot of editions is, okay, party, I want to sneak up and like scout this thing out. The party's not going to wait around for you to sneak up. It's like, that's boring. I don't want to wait for a rogue. I'm playing the assassin subclass. Guys, can we please stealth on this enemy so I can get my critical hit in the stab? And then your knight's like, what? And he turns and his armor's clanging, and then your cleric's howling at the moon. It's like your assassin never gets a sneak attack. And so the idea of the
Storing up
backs,
downtime.
not even storing back, but the flashback, like, heist movie flashback.
Yeah.
Of, I poisoned the drinks ahead of time, and I had the inside man do
Yeah,
this.
well, that's what I
Yeah.
remember. I came up with that system of,
Yeah.
like, okay, I store up 8 hours of downtime, and then I'm in combat, and it's like, actually, I used 3 of my stored up hours to, like,
There's a game called Honey Heist. I don't know if you.
no,
Okay. Its whole gameplay is you're a group of bears trying to steal honey, and its whole system is you, if you get into a situation, you say the flashback to make it work out because it's a heist. So it's a heist game, and so you have a ton of flashbacks. So one of the examples I saw is this guy's like about to beat them. He has a gun pointed to them, and then the player's like, "Well, shows a flashback. It's like we're at a gay bar together, and he put an explosive butt plug up the guy who was going to shoot them. Then he like pulls out the detonator and blows him up."
yeah.
And it was a little absurd at that point, but the DM's like, "This is basically the end of the game, so why not?" But
yeah, well, yeah, someone stole my system already.
Yeah.
Actually, well, no, it's too far off. But the flashback's actually really cool. Just the systems you can do with that sort of idea.
yeah. And so my thought was the system I'm making, which is just roll with it, which is basically extends the game and makes it funner, I think, is anyone can have flashbacks, but like each person gets like 1 charge of flashback. Rogues and thieves get more. And that's the idea, is like the rogues just get more flashback because that's their archetype.
Or you could say you have to roll to succeed
Yeah.
succeed in the flashback, and they're better at it.
Well, the flashbacks are based on a skill, so it's basically a flashback takes a skill roll. And the DM, you say, okay, this is the flashback. And then the DM's like, oh, that's a complicated flashback, so give me a stealth check, give me a poisoner's kit check, and give me a whatever check. And then if you mess up along the line, you can even say, like, you got out of there. But then there's additional bodyguards show up in this combat because the rogue alerted them that there's someone trying to poison people there. And so the rogue has this, like, all right, guys, I have the scene set out. I know where all the enemies are going to be. And then it's like, oh, there's more enemies because the rogue was spotted. And it's like, oh, we need to beat up security. And so the failures can add to the flashback of you still sort of succeed, but something else has happened.
So, with all systems but 2nd edition, what you have is either you have your enemy stands there and you stand there if you follow the rules of the game, right?
Yeah.
And in 4th and 5th edition, and 3rd, I guess, you hit them, they hit you. So it's like you keep rolling the dice, and every time you hit, it's like, why are we rolling dice? In 1st edition, you stand there, the enemy stands there, you roll, you roll, you roll. It's like, you miss, they miss, why are we rolling the dice?
Yeah.
All we're doing is missing. And same in First Heroes, right? It's like, all you do is miss. It's like, why are we even rolling? And so I think that's where this idea comes in, is, okay, now every other turn, every 3 turns, even if we're terrible, something's happening.
Yeah.
And so it actually makes potential. Now, why I actually brought this whole system up.
It's the nerf Reginald's dodge.
No, I have a different system in First Heroes already. I have heroism in First Heroes.
Yeah.
Heroism is a more complicated version of this thing already, where every time you miss, you can just double your roll next time. Right?
Yeah.
That's been in the game from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my game, First Heroes does not need this system because it already has heroism, and heroism
And dual wielding.
and heroes. Well, and the way dexterity works has been so reconfigured that Reginald's, because Reginald's strategy was that he was so fast, he'd go into combat and he'd kill everything before they could act.
Yeah.
But now what would happen is his rapier would break from the speed of his attack, or although his rapier might have
No,
been
he has
indestructible.
knives. He doesn't have rapiers.
No, he had a rapier that let him move like one attack per hit.
That's a knife that cuts things. It's this enchanted knife. It just it's casting magic while it cuts.
So his knife would now break or go flying out of his hands.
Yeah.
Or he would injure himself trying to hold on to it as he's going crazy. And then on top of that, there's now armor, which means like 20 light attacks is now 0 damage.
Well, I mean, Reginald's Reginald. He has his own problems because his rapier is a vorpal blade. That was.
And now armor is so much more important
that
if he didn't kill everyone in the first round, he's now in a lot of trouble because he's not wearing armor, even though armor slows you down.
See, he's wearing a blue shirt.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that
he went through a lot of trouble to get that blue shirt.
The problem is he has a really good shirt, but there's this idea of but yeah, the point of this whole thing, bringing up this rule, is I haven't tested this rule in the slightest.
Yeah.
And it could be terrible. It could be totally terrible. And that's actually my point that I'm bringing up. Like, if you're listening, you're like, oh, this is a great idea. Go ahead and try it out. Maybe it's awesome. Maybe someone's already thought of it. Maybe someone's thought of a better system. But it could be completely terrible. And I just wanted to bring up that crazy, crazy system in the first issue of Dungeon Magazine, where they were saying, okay, there's a lot of things you do that you don't know how to resolve them, right? And so let's use your attributes to resolve them.
Yeah.
And so you think, okay, cool. So I want to jump over a gap. So this is the first time someone's like, okay, let's use dexterity to resolve jumping over the gap. And this is the first time someone came up with that idea. And their idea was not, for some insane reason, okay, roll under your dexterity on a d20. His idea instead was, okay, roll a d100 and look at this chart and then add your dexterity to the roll. And that will tell you what roll you need to succeed on another d100 roll when you add in your dexterity modifier. And it was like 3 or 4 rolls in a chart, and he's like, yeah, this is a system. It makes resolving things way easier. Makes it easier on the DM. It's way faster. And you're like, no, it's not. It's not at all.
It's terrible.
And it's funny because I've complained before about armchair game designers, and even the very first people doing this stuff, it's like, you clearly never tested this in your game.
No.
And I do wonder about like the Cyclopean Encyclopedia, whatever it's called, Gygax made. I wonder if he ever actually played a level 28 campaign or something, because it like, even it doesn't matter how good a game designer you are, you need to test that stuff.
If you're playing 5th edition and your party somehow gets to level 20, don't go, ooh, let's get challenge rating 25 enemies, or let's send an army of goblins against them. It even says in the game rules, these are godlike figures now. The game is no longer heroes fighting monsters. It is no longer a fighting game. It is, let us have a lich, right? Really powerful lich, who has moved a mountain to block a trade route of a town.
Yeah, it's a different scale.
How does this level 20 party solve this? The mountain is full of goblins. It's immoral, though, to kill all the goblins, but the town needs to have this trader. You need to change the scale of the game once you hit.
Have you ever heard of Adventurer Conqueror King? It's a system that explicitly has that in its design, where you start as an adventurer, and then you get strong enough that you're basically in charge of a mercenary band, and it becomes a war game, and that's Conqueror. And then you take over a kingdom, and then it's about like politics and managing a realm, and the system is built to actually accommodate that at 3 steps.
But it even says like you're heroes of the you're adventurers, you're heroes of the realm, heroes of the world. Like, you're conquered the world at level 20.
It'd be funny if it was like, okay, once you get to level 20, put all your books aside, whip out the Exalt, and now you're playing Exalt.
Well, even if you look at 2nd edition, if you somehow get your druid to level 20, and I say somehow because that's I think in all of the editions of D&D, a level 20 druid is probably the hardest character to get.
Oh, because you have to kill the leader of the druids.
Yeah, and there's more steps than just killing him. You have to do a ridiculous amount of stuff. But let's say you have a level 20 druid.
Or you have to like have a druid off with him. I'm not really
that's basically it.
Yeah.
That character is not really someone you can play with anymore.
Because he's the best druid on Earth.
Yeah. And the powers he can freely plane travel.
He's immune to the elements.
He can walk through mountains. He can like travel through fire. He can use water to quick travel.
I think he resurrects if he dies or something, or reincarnates or whatever it is.
Like this entity is no longer a character you can really contend with, and then there's like, all right, so that's kind of ridiculous. If you're playing it right, a level 20 fighter has a castle and an army. It's like, okay, that's a little less, but he has a level army. Then you look at a rogue. He has a thieves guild at level 20. He has access to any magic item he wants. He can basically turn invisible. And it's like, okay, level 20 wizard has access to wish. Level 20 cleric can talk with God just like on the phone. It's like, hey, can you do this for me?
Yep.
Even in 2nd edition, it's ridiculous. The ranger at level 20, he has like wyverns and phoenixes and like pet dragons.
There's something I want to point out that we did take into account for in our 1st edition game that people might think that we didn't account for. A level 2, let's say, elf is not the same as a level 2 thief in the slightest. And I don't mean in terms of one's way stronger. I mean, you can get to level 5 as a thief by the time the elf gets to level 3.
Yeah.
So we are aware that they're not equivalent, but even then, the elf outstrips basically everyone at everything. Yeah. And
except when it comes to breathing in poison gas.
And the dwarf, yeah, and the dwarf, yeah, we don't have an elf in our party anymore. And the dwarf, so the thing about a dwarf, right, is they could have like half the, like XP could take twice as long for them to level up. And they would still be the highest level character in your party because they're the only character that would live.
Yeah.
Because we had poisonous gas hit our party and it killed everyone. The only people that survived were the cleric, who it's the highest resistance class sort of normally, and then the dwarf, who is just the highest resistance character in the game.
Yeah.
And the dwarf just has everything.
Just sucked up the gas and
the one thing dwarves can't do is use two-handed weapons, I think.
And they're slow.
Yeah. Because they're too short for two-handed weapons. But then the elves we actually changed elves quite significantly, but we made them much more interesting than just a dual class, basically, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their own variants. So you know how we talked about last time about how Heroes of Might and Magic 4 modding's like blown up and it's going crazy? So the day before we recorded that episode, I think it was, the Heroes 4 modding community imploded. One of the main modders got very upset with everyone else and deleted all his stuff and like took it all offline.
Oh.
And he was the one that had like everything, like all the Equilibria stuff, all of
Heroes 4?
Like all the Heroes 4 mod advancements and all the like, here's the hex values and he just took it all down in protest of what he viewed as his poor treatment. So back to square one. I think the other modders, they still have like, the files on their computers. And so it hasn't gone back to square one, but it was kind of ironic that we were saying it's just blown up, it's going crazy, everyone's doing great, and then the lead guy just sort of had a bit of and I don't know enough to say if it was I don't know enough to say if it was justified that he got upset or not, right? But personally, as a modder myself, and having seen modders go crazy before and do stuff like this, you can protest against the people that, the company you were modding for, you don't like them, you can protest against them. Like if Nexus is doing something nasty, you take your mods off of there, you protest against them. If the game is now stealing your data, like it was for me with Age of Wonders, you can protest against them. Maybe you stop making mods. I didn't choose to do that, but maybe you stop making mods in protest. The players are mistreating you, then you stop making mods. Yeah. But there's like 99% of people aren't the problem for you, and you're punishing them for something they didn't do. And so like when when the creator of a bunch of RimWorld mods went insane, she basically turned her mod into a virus which destroyed your game. And it was like you had like the reason she did it was because Twitch, I think it was, said you're violating our terms of service by linking to a place that gives you money. And she's like, that was a charity I linked to, and now I'm going to destroy my mods and destroy your save game files. And so another modder came along and said, okay, this will fix your game save. And I still follow that guy. It's like, I think Lightning Codex was his name. It's like, thank you. But so with the Heroes 4 guy, I could see him saying, look, I'm stepping off the mod team. I'm not modding Heroes 4 ever again. I'm not coming back onto the forum ever again. But 99% of the players just want to play Heroes 4 mods. And I don't think punishing them is... Now, what you could say as a protest, it means that they are now on your side, because it's like, if you're unhappy with what I did, then you have to help me fight against the people that did it. But what happens this is true in protests and politics as well, right? You see it with all the people that block roads, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone turns against you rather than, oh, wow, this is so extreme that you are doing this thing, so I need to be on your side. And that doesn't happen.
So when I was in grade 6, I had a research paper that I had to do. And internet was incredibly slow at our school. It was really difficult to use. And I was using a really old computer. And our teacher had said, you can use Wikipedia for your research source. So I loaded up Wikipedia to research. And it was on that day that they said, imagine an internet without easy-to-access information. Consider donating, and for today onward, just for today, we're not letting people access Wikipedia. And since that, because I couldn't get that information at that moment, I've had the spite-filled hatred for Wikipedia asking for donations.
Well, okay. I've donated to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Do you know why they don't have enough money to keep running all the time?
No.
This will make you hate them even more. So it's actually not that expensive to run Wikipedia. Like, it costs a lot for, like, a person, right?
Yeah.
Like, thousands upon thousands upon maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. But they get that much money. They get far more than that much money. Most of the donations they receive, they take and they donate to other charities of their choice. And these charities are not, like, Save the Puppies, 100% of our proceeds goes to puppies. These are stuff like Stonewall and Mermaids and not just trans organizations, but very controversial charities. So I'm not saying like, oh, it's terrible that they're giving it to the wrong organization. I'm saying they're giving it to charities that maybe 20% of people actually like.
Yeah.
And some of these charities seem more like money laundering than anything. And so the reason, if Wikipedia didn't do this, they would have like 10 times the money, and they wouldn't need they would need to do a 10th times less big.
But back to that protest, we talk about him sometimes, the Romanian YouTuber.
Yeah.
He has this interesting thing he talks about politics, voting in his country of Romania, which is there was two parties, and he was quite for one party, quite against another party. And the one party he was for had this one policy change that he hated because it made his life objectively worse. And they went through with it. And he said, I am never voting for that party again. It's like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. That doesn't drive me anymore. What drives me in my voting is my absolute hatred for you for making my life worse.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's me and the Conservatives in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's me actually and the Liberals now.
Well, yeah, and the Liberals, but I mean, I was never going to vote for the Liberals anyways.
Yeah, they went back on electoral reform.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, never again.
You didn't even have a choice the first time, right?
I didn't have a choice the first time.
But
just even them doing that, like, I didn't vote for them, but even them doing that, it's like,
oh, so
no.
you can't trust these guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the Conservatives, I don't know.
Not even never again. Never.
I don't know what the Conservatives' record of following through with their promises is, but they were just making Canada a more and more, like, techno-authoritarian country.
Yeah.
And now that doesn't mean the Liberals... You always have to, give the qualifier, but that doesn't mean the Liberals are better. They continued the policies. They didn't end them.
Yeah.
It's just all our parties want to make Canada a worse place to live.
On the politics thing, you know that guy who had like the most crime-ridden country in the world, and it's now not as crime-ridden because he arrested like hundreds of thousands of people?
El Salvador?
Yeah, El Salvador. So El Salvador...
That's a country, yeah.
Yeah, the El Salvadorian president, there's this meme going around right now, which is, get into office, do what you said you're going to do, be successful in it, get elected again at 80 or 90%, like everyone voted for you, become the most popular person ever to be elected in the human history. And it's like, simple formula, fulfill your promises.
Wait.
We don't count Putin or the...
Who was it? It was Kim Jong-il
Yeah.
was like 112% approval rating or something. That's more than everyone in his country.
We don't count him.
I think he is the most popular. And what about Augustus? He had like 100% approval from the people that could vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it maybe modern history then.
Yeah.
I actually think that
We need another
Kim Jong-il
Augustus.
is actually a really sad...
Like the dead dude or the current one?
Kim Jong-un, sorry.
Yeah.
Is really sad. I've seen these two different bits of footage, which is he's getting into this boat and it's leaving the shore, and the soldiers are running into the water and just like rapidly waving to him and cheering. And he's looking at them. He's got like this sort of like happy smile on his face, like, oh, my soldiers love me so much. And there's another thing where he went to watch a badminton or a tennis game, and everyone's just like smiling, beaming at him and clapping and cheering him on. And he lives in the most false...
Well, I've kind of wondered sometimes if he's like a Siddhartha type character. Like, I don't know if he actually knows how his country is.
That's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it's sad. Is he...
He might not actually be a bad person.
That's what I'm saying with this. He's in this, like, dream.
Yeah.
He's living in a dream that is horrible.
Like, his advisors around him might be creating a false world for him. Yeah.
Or even if either way, if it's he's like innocent in a horrible situation,
or if he's so pathetic and mean and
Yeah.
evil that he needs this just to
Yeah,
feel
it's-
loved.
Like his life is awful.
It's like this hollow facsimile of
Yeah.
a person. Yeah. Even if he knows that he's doing all these horrible things, and it's like, yeah, but I want to feel loved. It's like, you're not loved.
Yeah.
You're feared. And you're not even feared in a, like, Stalin way.
Yeah.
You're just feared in a, your soldiers are scary and I hate your country sort of way. It's
Yeah.
like, there's no, like, Putin is the kind of guy you'd be terrified to, like, look at wrong. But there's a sort of respect there.
Yeah.
There's Kim Jong-un. It's just this sort of, like, this fat dude that is spoiled.
Yeah.
Like, you're scared of him because he's a spoiled fat guy that'll take it out on you.
Yeah.
Whereas you're scared of Putin because Putin needs to maintain control, and
Yeah.
he's a smart guy that will do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Like, Kim Jong-un will kill you because it makes him feel better, even if it destabilizes the country. Putin will take you out if it's the best thing he thinks for the country.
yeah.
Yeah. And that might even be too harsh to Putin. Like, I heard recently, actually, that when he came in, he seemed a lot more like an idealistic sort of person, and, you know, could be the power corrupting type thing, or it could be Russia was an ally, and as they became less and less of an ally after World War II, with the communism and whatnot, and then they fell, and it's like, yeah, they're an ally again, but then they became more and more competent. Putin might not have changed. The propaganda about him might have changed.
Yeah.
Right? It's always hard. Like, you see all these people die around him, and you're like, oh, wow, what a bad guy. Conveniently missing out the whole, like, all the journalists in the States that die in their self-driving cars that suddenly...
Yeah.
Or how the CIA... This isn't conspiracy. They have a gun that causes heart attacks. So it shoots an icicle with poison in it, and the poison causes a heart attack. And the heart attack isn't traceable to a poison, because it's like a poison that just denatures itself. So it's like, so people, oh, that journalist had a heart attack at like 40. Yeah, bad diet or whatever.
Yeah.
They admitted to having these things, right? And then, yeah, you see all these journalists that are about to break some story, and their car swerves off the road randomly, and it's like, oh, these cars are able to be remotely controlled. And so, Putin looks bad when we availability heuristic cherry pick all the stuff he's done, and that is bad, right? But that might not be unusual for a government.
Yeah.
I think it's bad. I don't want it to happen, but it doesn't mean that he is worse than a different country.
Yeah.
Now that you could possibly use other things to say he's worse than another country. Like, you could say, well, he's never given up power. Like, well, he has, but you said it was fake, right? So, okay, what about this pass the ball back and forth that the parties do, where all they do is become more authoritarian and centralize power more?
Uniparty.
Now, I don't actually think... Now, people's...
That's why it's called the Uniparty.
But, well, sort of, I don't want to use that term just because... So Sitch and Adam, they talk about the Uniparty and how it's such a stupid idea because the parties clearly hate each other and they have these arguments against each other, right? And I think that's true. I think there are ideological differences between the party. So I don't believe in the Uniparty in the sense that they're working together. What I believe is, though, they, at the end of the day, are still working against the citizens, and it's all about drawing more power into the government. So it's not a Uniparty, but it's like a government with... It's a government with two heads...
Yeah.
Like a hydra fighting their country. Yeah. And so unfortunately fight, maybe opposed to. They see them as people that you need to take control from because they're too stupid to make their own choices. And they need to draw more and more power into themselves. And so even if they disagree about how to do it, and even if they disagree about what they'll do once they have the power, they both agree we want all the power.
Yeah. And
so it's more of a natural... We've talked about Moloch before, where there's just so many natural forces that drive people towards suboptimal positions. Like, the example I gave recently was, okay, you want to bribe some politicians to implement a policy, but you don't want to spend any money. So you go to the leader of the Democrats and the leader of the Republicans in the States, and you say, okay, I want this bill to pass, and so here's the deal. When it comes up to vote, if it doesn't pass, I will give whoever voted the most for it $500 million.
Yeah.
And so they go, okay, well, if we send one person, then we get it, unless they send two. So we'll have to send three. But so then both parties try to vote as much as they can for it, hoping it doesn't pass. But then it passes because they're both voting for it, and so it passes, and you don't have to spend any money.
Canadian corruption's really cute because you're saying that amount of money. There's a recent scandal in Canada, which is
I just made up a number, but
yeah, but the number is sort of believable.
Yeah.
Well,
it's kind of high.
It's kind of high, but still. So there's a guy who basically was elected, put in our Senate, and he the Senate's meant to be nonpartisan, educated people who sort of know Canadian law. That's what they're there for. So this guy has donated huge amounts of money to the Liberal Party. He's donated tens of thousands to the Liberal Party. And it's like, in total, something like 40,000. And it's because we have limitations on how much money you're allowed to donate to a party.
Wasn't there like Trudeau's made like 100,000 off of his sort of side? It's not quite a charity, but he's got like this sort of institution he's the head of. He's made like 100,000 off of it. And you look at like Nancy Pelosi in the States, who's a millionaire, and she's a senator, and you're the prime minister.
Yeah.
It's like the best you could steal was 100,000.
Well, it's like the corruption money is less than what some people either get paid without being corrupt.
Yeah.
I was just like, it's like this big scandal of this guy who's donated $40,000 because they're biased towards him because he's given them money. It's just like,
there's a lot less of us as well.
There's a lot less of us and a lot capital, like different levels of things. But it's just like, there's like corruption scandals where people make millions.
You know, I was thinking anything taken to its extreme, it crumbles and falls apart into corruption and decay unless you're constantly vigilant, and you can't keep the system. You can't maintain the system forever. Eventually, the system will crumble, and you have to build a new system. That's the go out into chaos, rebuild, right?
Yeah.
That's the story. But I was thinking, it's weird that that's the case. Like, we need hierarchies, but hierarchies always tend towards corruption, right? Like, it's a natural law. And I was thinking, you know, you could name that natural law, right? Because it's weird that it's basically this game theory has created this inescapable world where corruption and evil is inevitable. And I was like, and you have to you can't just sit there. You have to fight against this evil constantly. I was like, that's Satan. There is a being in the psyche of humanity that we must constantly fight against, because for some reason, not at small scale, but at mass scale, it turns us towards decay and corruption. And it's like there's an actual enemy. It's not imaginary. There's this. It's the gap between the stars. It doesn't exist, but it's made up from all the gaps.
Well, on a smaller scale, Dota 2, when I talked about the meta changing, like there's certain things that are good and meta gets figured out. At a certain point, if Dota's not updated, like sometimes the game isn't updated for half a year, it stagnates, and it's like everyone's playing these 5 heroes. And people don't want to play anymore because like, oh, I'm just going to fight the big red guy, and he's going to kill me. This game isn't fun right now. And so Dota needs to be destroyed. Like, literally, it is torn apart. And the big red guy, like, his move that's killing everyone, it gets taken from him. He can't do that anymore. And Dota's completely changed.
So, okay.
And so, like, as a microcosm, the Dota game meta is that thing with government of, like, and it's people finding the optimization and the best ways to abuse and, like, wiggle their way into it. And
so chess has changed a lot over the years. They had a big nerf to pawns, I think it was back in like the 1600s, where pawns could move 2 spaces, I think, every turn or something. Yeah. And so they're like, this is ridiculous, they're too powerful. They nerfed them so they could only move 1 space. And they found it made the chess games take like twice as long. It's like way too slow. They're like, the game just takes forever. So they're, okay, what we have to do is we have to allow them to move 2 spaces on their first turn. And then that makes the game much faster again. And so chess has been a game that has evolved and changed a lot over the years. And so even chess isn't immune to this corruption and this fight against corruption, right? But I was thinking, so we have to build systems like Go, maybe. Is it possible to or maybe we don't. Maybe we need to be the hero, right? But it's kind of weird, like, okay, you have to be the hero, right? Like, I am very much of, my politics is hero politics. It's not, I want this party, that party, I want authoritarianism, I want freedom. It's like, no, you have to renew, you have to fight. You have to fight the current, you have to look for weaknesses and shore them up, and then you have to find new ways to deal with them as fast as possible, right? But Go is interesting because it's like, there is perfection somewhere. Maybe it's only possible in Go and God, but there is perfection out there.
Well, Go is basically yin and yang the board game.
I think, I mean, it looks like it.
Yeah.
But I think what Go does is its scope is greater than the human mind. So it may be that someday computers do need a new version of Go, right?
Yeah.
But a human can never, no matter how good they get at Go, they can never encapsulate the whole.
So we need to make a system of government that the human mind cannot encapsulate.
Yeah, which is kind of what the American system was tried to do, right? They tried to make a system of government from first principles that was insanely resilient and kept power to the people despite corruption, despite decay, and they did a very, very good job. The American government
It's
system
lasted for like 300 years.
like 1776, so like 250.
Yeah, 250.
Yeah, and that's only 250 years.
Yeah.
Like the Egyptians did better than that. Chinese did better than that.
Did they though? Because they had a lot of renewal and chaos and destruction. A king would die, someone would shift it.
Okay.
Or would you consider a long line of monarchy, like let's say the British king's line of that rulership? I mean, it had a few breaks in it, or
It had a couple civil wars and breaks, but the people remained. But I don't think that counts as a stable government in that
No.
sense. No.
but the old kingdom of Egypt and the Ming dynasty.
Yeah.
Like the Ming dynasty is 400 years, 500.
No, the Ming was like 50 years, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it was like the guy that founded it, his son set out to sail across the world, and when he got back, everything was destroyed. Basically, I think was how it went. But then I think
Hasn't one of the Chinese dynasties lasted 400 years?
probably maybe it was the Ming, maybe. But I think even the first two people of the Ming dynasty, like the son revolted against the
Yeah.
father or something. So even if the dynasty stayed,
Yeah.
there was still like infighting there. So that's kind of a hard one to say.
What about the Holy Roman Empire?
Yeah. San Marino, kind of debatably, they
The
were
city of Prague's government.
like San Marino is the oldest city on Earth. Not the oldest city, sorry, the oldest continuous country on Earth.
Yeah. Prague's one of the longest lasting cities, I know that.
Well, Damascus is older by far.
But in siege-wise, like being captured, I don't think Prague has been properly like it had a very long record of not being captured.
It's been invaded a lot.
Yeah, no, that's what's insane about Prague is it's being invaded a lot, but I think it's only been successfully captured twice, and it's like very long times apart.
So,
Yeah, 250 is pretty good.
well, if you look at like right, like the first king of ruled for 40,000 years,
Well,
like that.
I think that the British system, the constitutional monarchy, like basically since they set that up, it's had a pretty good run.
So the interesting thing about constitutional monarchy,
When did they set that up? That was
ages ago.
yeah.
Um,
But I don't think it's been disrupted since they started.
actually, was it ages ago? Was that with Queen Victoria?
No, it was before her. It was the signing of the human rights.
No, the Magna Carta was that the nobles were able to basically force the king to obey his own laws.
I thought that was the start of the constitutional monarchy.
No, because constitutional monarchy would be depends on like
Did Britain change since the Magna Carta, or was that the final?
yes, because
Revolt.
they got a prime minister,
Yeah, but I think the prime minister is a continuation of their system.
but they didn't have a prime minister after the Magna Carta.
Okay.
The nobles were the guy holding the king in check after Magna Carta.
I would say Magna Carta though is the start of modern like the Britain government section. I'd say the Magna Carta is.
I think they had a civil war after the Magna Carta.
Did they?
Yeah, with
War of the Roses?
Cromwell.
Cromwell?
Lobster shell people? Lobster
maybe.
hat tail?
Oh no.
Lobster tails?
It's been a while since I've looked at British history.
Because Magna Carta's really old. It's like 1400s maybe.
Okay.
Um,
Well then, since Cromwell, they've been continuous.
like the UK is a very old, or rather, the Isles, the British Isles, are a very old culture. Like
Yeah.
one of the oldest on Earth, weirdly.
And their culture kind of controls their government, kind of.
Yeah, they're weirdly well.
They were for a while very controlled by NIMBYism.
Okay, here's the thing. I was gonna say they're weirdly like I can't think of the correct word here. Correct, progressive, modern, something like that. Let's say,
Yeah.
right? Like they have the most advanced sort of government going way back in their history. Let's say, but the thing about that is a very biased view because they are currently culturally the winners of the world. Like the United States is the cultural powerhouse, but their culture is derived from the British culture. So if Chinese culture took over the world, and you were someone living in, like Indonesia with your Chinese culture, and you're saying, it's kind of weird that China had like such an advanced culture so far back in the past. It's like, well, duh, they conquered you, and so that's why you think that way. Or no, they didn't conquer you because you are Chinese, right? You're a Chinese descendant, basically. We are British descendants. Yeah. The whole Enlightenment is a British idea. Our laws are British laws. So the Brits look advanced because we use their culture. So
we could call the winner, though. There's the other side of that.
But for now, it's always temporary. It's always temporary. So the British common law was British culture. That doesn't mean that common law is the way. It means that it's not like, isn't it weird that common law, like this very modern idea, is like 1,000 years old, right? Yeah. It's like, isn't that weird? And it's, well, no, because the culture that conquered the world had common law.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, it seems modern because it's what we use now, but that's only because that was the successful culture. If the Chinese had conquered the world, then we'd be saying, like, isn't the mandate of heaven like such a weirdly modern thing to have ancient, like so many years ago?
Yeah.
But the American system, brilliant. It does have the flaw, though, that if you have a bunch of people working together, they will work against each other, and you'll have the thing I talked about where you can bribe them without giving them any money, right? However, you can't bribe a king. And so that is where kings are very, very handy, because this Moloch idea of your best interest is to make the world worse for everyone, including yourself.
Yeah.
It's a horrible, horrible thing. But it's the tragedy of the commons, and there's not really a way out of it except a monarch, or everyone working together. But what are the chances of that? So a monarch is a single person that can work against it, and because a single person can defeat Moloch, but a group of people can't. But the downside of a monarch is that they can be crazy, they can be corrupt, they can be evil. Yeah. But you might say that's worth it. Like, would you rather have a slow decline into chaos, or a roll of the dice every time a new leader takes place, but they can be good or bad?
I think would be very...
Okay, let's put in D&D terms, right? Do you want a debuff where you lose 1 health a second, or you gain or lose d6 health every second?
Yeah. So it's strange. I don't know about Queen Elizabeth's father.
George?
Yeah, George.
I think.
How long did he have the throne?
Not very long.
And who was before him?
Edward?
Yeah. But like the kings during the constitutional monarchy, when there was a prime minister, I don't know how much meddling they did, but definitely the meddling, I say meddling, was toned down, and Queen Elizabeth didn't do any. But one of the things that...
Well, maybe she didn't do any. I don't know if you've seen these theories about how the prime ministers, before they came into government, had wildly different views.
Yeah.
And when they went... Every prime minister that's come into government has acted kind of similarly,
even
though they were very different before they got in. And there's theories that was Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hidden soft power.
Yeah.
But I would like publicly, if in Canada how can we do a new law?
If Charles called it the Ninth Crusade?
Yeah, well, we'd have to listen. Well, maybe not.
Wait, but we already won, didn't we? Because the Jews are in Israel right now.
Yeah.
Let's have a crusade anyways, just for fun.
Well, no, the Crusades have the Christians take over the land, not the Jews.
Oh. Okay.
One of the Crusades, I believe... No, I'm wrong on that, but it is the Christians taking over the land. I don't think the Christians ever drove the Jews out, but it was taking that land. Anyways, we want a new law, and then we have to go to the Governor General, who is basically the mouth of the king.
Yeah.
And we say, can we please do this? And then the Governor General goes, sure.
Such a little creature with so much blood.
Okay.
It's the mouth of the king.
Yeah.
Like the mouth of Sarah.
Yeah, but we have this weird holdover, which is we're still subservient to the UK, even though we aren't.
Yeah. Well, we're part of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and it's traditionalism.
Yeah.
But what I would like for a constitutional monarch, and for the monarch to actually exert us, like you said, the crazy king, you don't know what you're going to get, is they don't come with new laws, but they do have absolute veto. And so you have, let's say, the UK. Let's go back 100 years. You have the UK. And it's a very solid, stable position, whatever it's in. It's got the empire. Well, maybe not 100 years ago. I don't know when they dissolved that.
About 100 years, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but it's like at the peak of its power, hypothetically.
Yeah.
And it's a very solid country. And then you have politician Slimebag McSlimebag shows up and he becomes prime minister because he like weaseled his way and he lied a whole bunch. And he wants to implement a whole bunch of new laws and he wants to get rid of some old laws. And the king could be a loony or it could be incredibly boring. But the king can say no to Slimebag McSlimebag. And so Slimebag's like, I want to do this. No. No. And so your country doesn't progress at all, but also doesn't decline. Like, it can stagnate, but it doesn't...
So, I don't think so. I think if you're not moving, you're drowning, right? Like,
but basically, like, it's like you said, the king can't be bribed. It's a higher power which can basically say no.
yeah.
And so...
No, I think a constitutional monarchy is a nice balance to have.
What I'm saying is I'd like the monarch to exercise their power.
They have. That was the King Bing crisis back in the 70s, 60s, something like that. The Governor General, Bing, vetoed a bill or whatever it was that Mackenzie King, the Prime Minister, was trying to pass. This was in Canada.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you can't pass that. And so he actually used the power of the Queen to prevent it. And it caused this horrible mess in government where they eventually sort of said, okay, no, you can't actually do that. You can't veto us, and you're fired. And
I disagree with that decision.
Yeah, no, I think
that was probably one of the biggest mistakes Canada ever made, is he should have been allowed to veto. And then the Queen at the time should have been the one to sort that out. Like, her word should have been the absolute on that. It's like, no, he was right. And then the Canadians should have tucked their tail and said that. Or she said, no, you're wrong, let it pass. And then he should have tucked his tail. But that power should have still stayed in him to say no.
You know what would be a way to do it, I think, is if... And the Governor General would make it a lot more possible. Because it's nice to have the intermediary to the king or queen.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to just depose a king. But what you could do is you could say, you get a veto, but once you use it, you're fired. And we will listen to you, but then you're fired. I think that would be and it would be even better if we said, and you're never allowed to work again, and we'll put you on like a pension or something.
Yeah.
And so, because otherwise you're like, well, I was the Governor General, I've got all these connections, and so, but it's
or it's like, do this thing and you'll get a nice cushy job here.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, you do the veto, you're fired, no one can hire you, you're on a pension. I think that would be an interesting way to do it. But again, these are just little... there is no solution. There's always just changing and changing and changing and fighting Satan, who hides in the shadows, basically. Like, all of... You know have you seen the cover of Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes? It's like this giant monster made out of people. He did it to represent society, but that's like Satan. It's like the all the incongruous edges of humanity outline this invisible shape that has power and can move and fight and interact with the world. And that's Moloch, and that's Satan. I wonder if that was Satan, like, or
Satan is the enemy.
Yeah.
Like, what's his, in Faust, when he summons the demon, which is the devil. What's his name?
Faust?
No, the demon Faust summons.
Isn't it Satan?
No, he doesn't summon Satan. He has a different name. But
Okay.
anyways. But it's very clearly Satan. It doesn't call itself Satan, but it does call itself the enemy. And it is the adversary to humanity. That's one of the other things it calls itself. So I'm the adversary of humanity.
Yeah, so it's Satan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think...
That's an interesting thought of that's what Satan is it's the individual versus the spirit of Moloch, the chaos of the masses.
Satan is the thing that we must be ever vigilant against. Yeah. So with your idea of the king having this veto where you can just kind of hold people steady, it reminds me of the ancient Egyptians, how when you die, you go to the afterlife.
Yeah.
And your soul's weighed on the scale with a feather. And you're brought before 42 judges. And the thing is, they don't say, like, oh, did you steal? Did you... Like, they do ask that, right?
Yeah.
But there's 42 of them. You know, Judge 1 might have taken care of, like, did you steal? Did you murder? Did you whatever, right? But then Judge 2 is like, okay, so you didn't do anything wrong. Now, what did you do that made your life why did we waste time letting your soul be on this earth?
Yeah.
Did you justify your existence, or we will destroy you because you're nothing?
Judge 42. Pineapple on pizza?
Yes. Welcome. You're the first.
Well, no, I think what would be interesting, actually, is Judge 42 asks a question.
You just have to answer honestly.
Yes, it's innocuous. It is as innocuous as, like, liking pineapple pizza, that's fine. If you don't like it, that's fine. You just have to be honest to him.
Yeah, and so if you try to please him, that's yeah. Well, I wouldn't doubt that was what one of them was like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Book of the Dead actually outlines all of them, but you just look it up. Judge 42, pineapple on pizza, right there. Bing, bang, boom. Oh, well. That's actually great, though, because then I don't care what you answer, as long as you answer honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the one takeaway from that is, do something with your life before you go to the Egyptian afterlife. But also, it's not enough to remain still. Yeah. And this is... I'm not saying progress for the sake of progress. I'm in that unless you are the board game Go, you are wrong, and you will need tweaks and changes as people find your flaws. Yeah. And now I do wonder, like, it's very fun to speculate about alternative government forms and better government forms, like our assassin...
The orphanocracy.
The orphanocracy thing, yeah. It's very fun, but I mean, that's what the communist theorists did in a way. Yeah. And that's what Mussolini did, and then he put it into action. And I wonder... Is the speculation... I think everything has a value to it, like even if you don't recognize it immediately. And as there was a great quote from Jordan Peterson. I don't know if I've talked about it on the show, but it was basically, if you don't have if your measures don't show value in something you find compelling, your measures might be wrong, not the thing. So it's like, okay, I love video games, but my measures say that it's just lazy and I'm wasting my life, and so therefore video games are bad. It's like, wait. If you truly, in your heart of hearts, think video games are very fun and engaging and important, maybe you need to come up with a series of measures that means that's true. Yeah. And maybe that will actually guide you towards a more correct series of measures, or a less wrong series of measures.
I really like that, because that allows for
the strippers of God.
Yeah. Sargon had this really interesting discussion with two philosopher-like fellows. But before that, of Joe Rogan talks about video games. Yeah. And how he was ridiculously addicted to them. And he kind of talks about video games as they're a bad thing. And they were bad for him, because he's super addicted to them. Like, I didn't realize how addicted he was. Like, they were life-destroying addiction for him. Yeah. But other people can have, like, fine lives playing video games. But there's a measure to that of, because they're so destructive to Joe Rogan, his measurement for them is, like, he doesn't measure them as something that are good. And a lot of these do something good with your life people hate video games. But as you said, it gets rid of the cognitive dissonance of, I can respect these people, I can agree with their points of view, but video games can still be valuable to me.
So here, I think this is how Jordan Peterson said it. It was, if you're pursuing a goal but your frame of reference makes you unmotivated in it, rather than assuming you need to abandon the goal, perhaps consider you're using the wrong frame of reference. Yeah. Yeah. And so you say, well, how does being a YouTuber help anyone? Was, I think, one. It's like, you're just this person making videos online, and it's like, well, maybe change your frame of reference to, I'm enjoying myself, I'm creating art, I'm learning new things, I'm providing money for myself and my family at the very least. There's, and these measures, this is important too, will be contingent on the individual. Yeah. Like you said with Joe Rogan.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it gets rid of that cognitive dissonance. So it's the prostitute of God. Sargon was talking
Mary Magdalene.
Yeah. Well, I disagree with that statement that she was a prostitute. No. And that's actually one of the divisions in the church.
I mean, she was into feet, Connor. I mean,
so
there's something wrong with her history.
The two people that Sargon was talking with, one of the situations they're talking about how, like, incels, and so, like, maybe prostitutes aren't bad because, like, men need to have sex was their thing, and so the prostitute basically allows for that. And Sargon said, yeah, but it's still immoral what the prostitute is doing. And I said, but it's causing all this, like, what if we definitively had, like, if we allowed prostitutes, like, rape in your country is 20%. Let's just go extremes. Yeah. If we allow prostitutes, rape drops to, like, 0.01%. Yeah. And so it's like, it's good to have this because it's getting rid of rape. And Sargon's saying it's still immoral to be a prostitute. And it doesn't mean, like, the act's immoral even if it's doing something that's good. It's like Aladdin stealing food to feed the children and feed himself. The act of stealing is wrong. He is taking from someone else's labor, and they're not getting anything, but he is feeding himself and feeding others, which is good. The two things don't cancel each other out. It doesn't make a good action, or it doesn't make a bad action. It's stealing is wrong, and it's wrong. Feeding the poor is good, and it's good.
And Sargon says he doesn't like Kant.
I think he's misunderstood Kant, because like he talks about, in this argument, he's talking about objectivism versus the other one, like the greatest good for most people.
Oh, like utilitarianism?
Yeah, utilitarianism versus objective. And he was on the side of objectivism, of the action itself is good. He was constantly on...
Well, like deontology.
Yeah, he was constantly on the action itself is good. Like, that's what we have to do things. So, if you have a mad scientist, and he's trying to kill a bunch of people, father of toxic gas.
Yeah.
So he's trying to kill a bunch of people. And so he makes a chemical that makes plants grow. I'm not talking about him specifically.
Yeah.
But let's say this guy's trying to make a thing to kill people. That's his goal. And it ends up making plants grow. And the world population can quadruple because of his actions. He's not a good person. He was trying to kill the world. It's just the result was good, but doesn't make him good.
Now that said, we went into this in much more detail in like episode 6 or something of The Philosopher and the Fool, where we talk about Kant for like 3 episodes.
Yeah.
There's like 10 hours of Kant if you're interested. But what we determine and we haven't changed, I don't think, since then in this, at the core, is there is good actions and there is evil actions. But Kant is very hard to agree with, because you say, well, there's situations where you should lie. And our determination of that was, yes, just because there are good things and bad things does not mean we know what they are.
Yeah.
So lying is mostly bad, but we cannot say what actually is at the core of that badness. And it's like a fractal where you can go down and down and down to infinite depths and variations. But there is still a good and a bad thing. So Aladdin stealing might actually be the correct thing to do in certain circumstances.
But he still has the act of stealing on his soul.
Well, no, what I'm saying is he doesn't if it's the right kind of stealing.
Yeah.
Now, you could say Aladdin isn't doing the right kind of stealing.
Yeah.
But, like, the classic example is when the Nazis come in and they say to Anne Frank, like, or so they say to the people, "You're hiding any Jews," and they're like, "No." That's a lie.
Yeah.
But the... What?
No, it's just continue on.
Okay. So they're lying to the SS, but people say, so then Kant doesn't work. But what you're saying actually is that this is the infinite sandwich. This is the dance of yin and yang, where there is a point of good within the evil, and there's a point of evil within the good, where you say it's always good to give to the poor. It's like, not always. And it's always bad to lie. Not always. That doesn't mean that there isn't an absolute truth. It doesn't mean everything's subjective. What it means is that it's a much longer sentence to say what is actually good and evil. So lying is bad isn't a correct statement. A slightly less wrong statement would be, lying is bad except when you are acting not in your self-interest, but in the interest of promoting the greatest advancement of good and flourishing in the world, something like that. And even then, that's not really correct. Or you'd say, lying is only wrong when you are lying to yourself. As long as you are with intention acting for yourself, then you cannot lie, truly.
Yeah, so we said the fractal came down in our earlier discussion was me with killing.
Yeah.
Killing's wrong. However, if you're killing someone to stop someone else from killing while they're in the act, killing's the right thing.
Unless that person is killing a bear that is about to maul an orphanage.
Well,
Unless
I didn't go any deeper than that.
But what I'm saying is it's a fractal, right?
Yeah, it's a fractal.
Unless those orphans are all little baby Satans that are about to grow up and the bear is an agent sent by God. Unless God has become corrupted. And it's infinite. And so the answer to Kant is that it's more complicated than simply...
Here's a list of rules.
Here's a list of rules that a human can comprehend.
Yeah.
Instead, we must be the hero, and it's only through action, not through... it's the same thing. Only through destination, not... So, if you say that lying is bad, that's actually an end in of itself, lying, right? But no, it has to be the motion of trying to do good.
Yeah. Like
Kant said, the only true good is the attempt to do good. That's the only thing action that you can say actually has good at its core. And even then, people
Yeah.
have done horrible things trying to do good.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean Kant is right, but that just means that Kant's idea isn't logically flawed.
Yeah.
Because, as Nietzsche said, Nietzsche destroyed Kant's argument entirely because Kant was trying to make a logical foundation for morality. And what
Yeah.
Nietzsche said
The
was
something imperative.
the categorical imperative.
Yeah.
And what Nietzsche said was, it's all well and good, but you don't actually have to follow it.
Yeah.
He just destroyed his argument with a sentence, basically.
Yeah.
And
Jordan Peterson describes Nietzsche, the philosopher with a sledgehammer.
yeah, that's a perfect description for him. Because he just... But the stuff Nietzsche did, it's like, here's the human soul, just tear it in half.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't... Now, what Dostoevsky, who came before Nietzsche and who Nietzsche based a lot of his works on, could have countered Nietzsche with, is said, that's true, but you'd still feel wrong, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's what Dostoevsky said in The Brothers Karamazov, basically. Was, like, God doesn't make sense, we don't need God, it's illogical.
And that's what the
But I still feel that he's there.
yeah, that's sort of the thing with the whores of God, of it's still wrong to be a prostitute.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
it,
our example earlier, though, if you're going to be the best God
if you
prostitute ever.
truly believe
Yeah.
that is what you should be, then that is what you should be.
Yeah.
But most prostitutes are not thinking about making the world a better place for themselves and pursuing their divine goal on earth. They're thinking, now, if you're thinking about survival and that's all you can do, then I can't really blame you, right?
Yeah.
But the thing, okay, you have that city of 20% rape, right?
Yeah.
When you add the prostitutes and it goes away, what happens? Those men haven't become better men, right? Like, they have found an outlet. But here's the question. Have they actually, though? Maybe. Because this is where I have this fight in my mind a lot of the time. You say, okay, they didn't actually become better men because they just use an outlet to get rid of their frustration or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just because what that frustration and anger in those men is actually saying is saying, make something of yourself, right? Like, so that's the problem people have with porn. It's like, when you watch porn, you lose motivation to get a girlfriend or a wife or raise a family because you can have this facsimile. So you don't sit there like, man, I'm so lonely. I just really need to see a naked ankle right now. And instead of going, how do I see a naked ankle? Okay, here's the plan. I'm going to be a bodybuilder. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be funny. I'm going to go to all the parties. I'm going to meet women, and I will get to see one of their ankles, and we will have beautiful children and further society, right? And porn gets rid of that, and you just sit in your house and you watch porn. That is the issue.
Just stare at ankles all day.
Yeah, and that is the issue people have with it, right? But on the other hand, there's that line. I think it's in the Bible. It might be one of the auxiliary works, but it's flee from temptation, right? It's like, don't try to fight the stuff you can't fight head on, right? It's set your life up so don't set your life up for failure. Set your life up for success. And you could argue that, look, these people are deranged lunatics. Let's set up the world so they succeed. Like Dan Carlin was on this interview where he was talking about environmentalism. He has very similar views of environmentalism as me, weirdly enough. I don't know if it's historians or what, or history fans even, because neither of us are historians. But he was saying, I don't believe that the environmental problems can be fixed. And he said, I'm not talking about climate change, right? Because climate change, there's all these arguments. Is it real? Is it not? It's like, I don't care. Now, I think it's real, but I don't care because, look, there's garbage in the streams. That isn't good. It doesn't matter if you believe in the global warming or not. Look at the garbage in the streams.
Yeah.
We don't want that there. It's gross and it's killing things. And so he said, like, climate change is much too small a window to look at. And he said, but the only way to fix that is for everyone to work together at once against their own interests. He said, that's never going to happen. So I think that will be what ends humanity. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And then he said, but he's friends with Elon Musk, and they went on he was doing a walk around Tesla, and he was looking at all the stuff they were doing, and he was saying, what you've done here, now this is only if you agree that electric cars are actually a solution, right? But let's say they are, just for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
What you've done here is you've taken human self-interest and said, you don't have to work together with everyone. You don't have to convince everyone you need to save the environment. What you do instead is you take that selfish self-interest and you say, look, you want a cool car? Here's the coolest car on earth. You're saving the environment at the same time. That's a bonus if you care about it. If you don't, great, you're still helping everyone out.
So the United States...
And so that's what the prostitutes are, right? It's like the sort of direct the human nature in the direction you want it to go.
Yeah, the United States had this program in I think it was the 90s. I don't know if they still do it. It was for their beaches, which is they would hire teenage boys, like, I guess, like closer to men. And it was.
The Greek sailors when they came back from...
No. It was, all right. So, we have these scales on the beaches. And you fill up these bags with garbage. You bring it to us. We'll inspect to make sure you're not just filling it with rocks. We put them on the scale. You get money for the amount of garbage you picked up.
Yeah.
During that period, that was like the cleanest the beaches ever were. And it was because these boys would just, they wanted to make money because they're at the beach. Maybe there's ice cream, whatever, or they want summer work, but they want to be kind of optional. And so they just had this incentive to clean these beaches.
That's funny. You look at...
And so it's their self-interest to make money, and it was beneficial to the beaches.
I've seen these, there's been, like, right-wing isn't quite the right term, but there's been major political figures who have been mocked, right? Like, for being against the environmental movement. Like, they're like, we don't want you to push this bill that forces people to stop using coal or whatever.
Yeah.
But you look at your property, and you've got this, like, 7-acre solar farm. Like, you're against environment on one hand, and you're for it on the other. How does that work? And so, no, they're libertarians.
Yeah.
They don't want to be reliant on the government for power, and they also don't want the government to tell them what power they can and can't use. And so a great way to push renewable energy is libertarianism. Because you're like, you want to be free from the government, you want to be free from change. And that's why I really don't like, I don't know how it is around the world, but like there's so much regulation on power production for independent power producers. It's like you can only produce this much power, or you can only sell this much back, or you can, it's like, give them 100% freedom, and you don't need to put all these sanctions on coal and oil and whatnot. And so, you know what that tells me at the end of the day? This carbon tax and all these sanctions and all, it's all performance.
Yeah.
Especially because I went to, it was a governmental website, Canadian government website. On the same page, it made my mind melt. It talked about why we need to subsidize oil and why we need to tax carbon. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And they said, well, you see, now, it might seem weird that we're spending money on making oil cheaper and making it more expensive at the same time. But what we're doing is we're targeting it where it was most effective in both cases. So, the most effective thing that you can do to help the environment is to give money to giant corporations that can bribe you and to take it away from small citizens who can't. Really. That's the most effective way you can do it. How about, okay, crazy idea. Let's cut the carbon tax, let's cut the subsidies, and we'll see what happens with the environment.
Yeah.
Just for fun, let's see what happens. You know? Or you know, maybe it wasn't effective. Okay, what if you put the carbon tax on the companies and you give subsidies to citizens to help them buy oil, and you see what happens? Because if helping people buy oil and taxing carbon is good for the environment, how about we put the tax on the big companies and we give the money to the small citizens and we see what happens? Maybe, because you said it was good. Let's see what happens. And oh no, it's only, and this is why, even if they're right? Why is it that every time doing the right thing, you know, we've got to get in immigrants because we don't have any jobs and we don't have any money, and nobody wants to work anymore, and it's like, okay, so let's take in like 2 million immigrants a year we're doing in Canada right now. We have 40 million people. That's 5% of our country a year. We're like, that's 10 years in your country is no longer your country.
Yeah.
It's a foreign nation. So you say, okay, even less because people die, I guess. But, well, I guess the immigrants die too. Well, they're younger, so maybe not. But anyways, why is it that all these interests always take money from the masses and bring it to the elites? It's like, oh, I'm being a good person. I'm helping the environment. I'm helping the immigrants. I care about the boards. And it's always the most greedy, capitalistic, corporate stuff imaginable. It's like, we want a slave underclass of immigrants to prop up our rich oil companies. Like, that is what we are doing.
Yeah.
And then all the progressives and all the environmentalists and all the, we love immigrants. Yes, we have to do this. Yes, we're...
UK tea and prep. Who's going to serve us tea and prep?
We're progressive. We need them to... And I get so... We had an argument with our family the other, like a few weeks ago, and...
I didn't conduct myself the best with that.
Well, I think I messed up too, just because I didn't directly say my problem with what you said.
Yeah.
I should have said it more directly, because my problem with what you said is you were undercutting...
my earlier...
Well, it wasn't like, I shouldn't have said you're making your argument weaker, right? What I should have said is, I don't care that you don't want to work. I do, and nobody will give me a job. I apply and I apply. I've been applying for years. I don't even get an interview, right? And yet we say we need to import 2 million people a year. Now, maybe I'm stupid, right? Okay, maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm a terrible employee. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I'm not. But I have friends who are not lazy, who are not stupid, who have degrees, and they can't afford to live in dumps, like literally black mold everywhere, 10 feet by 4 feet houses, with 3 people. They can't afford to live in those places. And so they might never live near their parents and friends again because they simply can't afford it and they have to go live somewhere else that's cheaper.
Yeah.
And they're not lazy people. And it's like, but we need to bring in 2 million people a year. And okay, maybe the immigrants is a false flag, right? Maybe that's not the problem because they're not. It's what jobs do we so desperately need people for? Like, what are jobs for in the first? What are jobs for? It's like, well, you need people to build roads and you need people to, staff government jobs and you need restaurants. And okay, why? Why do you need roads? Why do you need restaurants? Why do you need government jobs? Well, because people need to get food and people need to have to drive. And okay, what is the degree? What variable determines to what degree people need these services? You say, well, how many people there are? Yeah. So the more people you bring in, the more people need services.
Yeah.
So you're not solving anything unless the people you bring in you treat as servants. And then they don't take up the space and amenities that you are making them provide you with. So it's like the most evil, money-grubbing capitalist, and it's, for some reason, this, any socialist, right, should be
Howling at this?
howling at. Yeah, they should be like, how are you treating these people like an underclass? How are you treating these immigrants like an underclass? You want to you want to make us Qatar, right? You want us to be 5% of the population and the richest people on earth. You want to just have 90% of our population be servants to our wealth.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? Well, because the GDP and the economy is, okay, is that all you care about? What about humanity? And I'm not even saying don't have immigrants and it's just, the arguments seem so backwards. And every time someone says, oh yeah, people don't want to work, it's like, it's a cut at me. It's like, do you think I'm that lazy? Do you think, it hurts me. I'm like, why? Maybe I am that lazy, but I don't feel like I am, right? And it just,
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like I'm crazy. And then, but then I look at I go to my friend and it's like, he's got a degree and no one is willing to pay him and he's 8 years of schooling, hard worker, smart guy. No one is either able or willing to pay him enough. And it's like, so what is the real problem, that we're pretending that the economy is doing great when it's not? And that's where everyone's beliefs are wildly disparate with each other? Or
it's partly Wild Coyote.
Or does it sound racist to say you want to stop immigration or something? Or does it?
That's probably part of it.
And maybe, okay, it's very easy to tunnel vision and say all my problems are because of this, right?
Yeah.
I was telling you about the narcissism thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it was kind of hit to myself. It's like, no, this is on me. It doesn't matter what the situation around me is, right? The world will change. It'll be better and worse.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility to get a job no matter what. So bringing the immigrants is still my responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I do think that is true. And so I shouldn't actually... Now, I do get upset, right? You can't control your emotions, right? But I shouldn't take that sadness to use against anyone, even the people advocating for the immigrants, right? The immigrants, I have nothing against whatsoever. The people advocating for the immigrants, I don't like that they're doing it, but that is me looking for a way to avoid responsibility, really, if you think about it, right? I can say it's, you know what it is? It's like, they're ruining the country. It's like, yeah, clean your room and then tell me how to fix the country. So once I have a job, then maybe I can get into it and start. Okay, so yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. No, well, it's hard because I do think, okay, I can say it's my responsibility to get a job. Okay. But so I am not the victim here. I can get a job. It's up to me. Okay. Yeah. I have ideas about how to get jobs even. And, a lot of it's health related, obviously. Still. Yeah. And once okay. That's not my concern. What it is, the core of my contention is basically just the whole, we need more servants. I think that's messed up.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm looking at it wrong but I don't see how you can bring in, what were we even talking about before? I just kind of went ranty.
Just politics in general.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to bring up on that, which is you don't know you're in hell until you're out of it. And this is really disturbing. So when you talk about me not wanting to work, so for the past year,
yeah.
It's not more than the past year. For the past 2 years, I've been dying. Actually, my soul has been withering, and so I like took a break sort of from work, like took the break, didn't really take a break because I was doing work with it, but even then I was like I reduced my workload so much, and it took everything I had even to work.
You're just tired
That
and
little
tired
bit,
and tired.
it took everything I had, and so I was like, all right, there's something wrong with me. And so as part we heard, both of us heard about this mold worse than asbestos basically. And one of the bits of advice on this is, all right, there might be something wrong with you. There might actually be something wrong with you besides psychological problems. Because I would like curl up crying, like, why am I so lazy? Why can't I work? Why can't I do anything? And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to stop caring about anything else. I just have to wake up at 7. Well, 7:30. I need to make a schedule. I need to make one goal. Start there. I need to rebuild myself because I can't do anything. So I started doing that. And I was still tired. But I was like, this is the one thing. This is why I clung to it. It's like, I don't care. I did that today. I did that today. Thank you for waking up at that time. Like, thanking myself. That's all I had. And then I probably got hit by a bout of loneliness, a little bit sick, and that at the same time, and I just had a complete breakdown. And so I phoned her mom about it. She recommended going to the doctor. And then I was also very hungry at that time too. Actually, I hadn't eaten all day, but it was like a bunch of things. Then I was talking with our stepdad and our mom later on about this and our concerns. And our stepdad said, go buy this product. And it's basically a monitor which lets you know what the air quality in your house is like. Because I was uncertain about the air quality, and so I set it up. And it turns out I was at dangerous levels of CO2, like in the red. And it was just sitting there. And I opened up the window basically, and my room got cold, so I turned up the heat. But I just had the window open until it went green, and I kept filtering air in and out. And I've been doing this for 5 days, and sleep feels like sleep. And
it's like what I told you about with that comedian Louis Spears.
Yeah.
He suddenly had energy after like 12 years of.
But what I realized is for these 2 years, like with the work on things like
running with ankle weights.
Yeah, running with ankle, but it's more so I am using my willpower solely.
Yeah.
And
that'll burn you out.
But is I'm running and running and running, and I can keep momentum, but each time it's like every once in a while there's a hiccup, and it's a little bit too much. And so I have to cut back. And then when I cut back, it doesn't get better. It's I can no longer have that momentum anymore. And so basically when it stopped, it's like, what is going on? I can't do anything anymore. And it wasn't like, I sort of know depression, loneliness, like, oh, I'm so alone, there's nothing that I can do about this. Sadness. This wasn't sadness, it's, I am tired. I am just so tired. I don't care. I can't act. Like,
well, that is depression.
Yeah.
That is.
Well,
yeah.
And so that's the thing is CO2 poisoning gives you depression.
Chronic fatigue. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you depression-like symptoms.
Well, no, chronic fatigue. I think this isn't like scientific, right?
Yeah.
But I think that depression is almost always chronic fatigue.
And it's weird. I was thinking about on the drive over when I was at a friend's house who lives in Victoria. It was a terrible house, but probably actually had pretty good air circulation through it. And I was getting really good sleep while I was there. And like I could fall asleep immediately, I could get up. And what's really nasty about CO2 poisoning is it makes you more tired and also makes it so you can't sleep. It gives you insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you both of those, and the sleep you do get doesn't help. And that's, the deviated septum, like not being able to sleep, whatever form it is.
Well, with me, it was with the sugar and whatnot, yeah.
It is vile. Like one of the facts, so they did this test. They had 2 classes that had equal levels of skill, and they gave them the exact same test. One of the classes was a normal classroom environment. The other class they had at like 2,000 parts per million or whatever, like the 2,000 on the scale, and this is really bad, CO2 poisoning in that room. And the class with the CO2 poisoning was a grade worse than the class.
So I was...
And just more on this.
Yeah.
I wrote a script during this time for a video I was trying to make. And I've been trying to do the voice recordings. And I'm reading the writings of an idiot. Like someone who's like an IQ deviation or like a writing level skill lower than what my actual skill is at. And so I've had to rewrite it in parts.
Yeah, hardship, they find, drops your IQ about 1 standard deviation.
Yeah.
like homelessness or something like that. It can drop it by 14 points, I think was the average, which is almost a standard deviation.
What I've realized, like right now, I'm still don't feel like I'm in the position where I can go like, oh, full steam at things. But it's like my willpower can actually start coming back. But I broke down crying earlier today, and I was doing a little bit of work because I need to get this done because I have this house and it just needs to be done. And I was doing some math, and it's like, oh, this is a little bit of a difficult problem. And so I did the quick solution, and I had joy in figuring that out. It's like I figured this thing
So
out.
like a happy tears type thing.
Yeah, well, it was happy and sad tears. It was both because it's like I figured this out, and it's happy that I felt that, but I broke down crying for the person who spent 2 years of their life not being able to find joy in solving a simple math equation. And so I broke down, I lamented the person who spent 2 years suffering. But it was also happiness that I could actually have that joy. It was like tears on both levels.
Yeah.
And I'm still very emotional about this. And it's like, I know I'm not at 100%, but it's just...
Something...
It's... Like, it's... Part of it is, I don't know if it's 100%, like it could get bad again, but it's... I'm not a lazy, useless piece of shit who can't operate as a human. I'm not as broken as I thought I was. And so there's like that sort of glimmer of hope that maybe I'm not. But there's also just the pure, like, I could enjoy doing math. Like, I love math, but I actually had enjoyment from exercising my mental range and doing something that before is like, this is just a chore I have to do. And it's still a chore I have to do. It's my job. But I could enjoy it despite that.
So, two very important things I want to say to that is what you're feeling now, or maybe what you'll be feeling a week from now. 2 weeks from now or a month from now, you're going to be at 90% of. And that's where you're going to stay, basically. Because it's the sort of, you go up and then you go down.
Yeah, no, I figure as much. But again, you don't know you're in hell.
And I'm not saying like, oh, don't get used to it. What I'm saying is, once you go down again, don't panic.
Yeah.
That's where you're meant to be.
Yeah.
You're on a high, and that's good. But
I don't feel like I'm on a high right now. I just feel like I can breathe again, like the weight's off my chest.
Or what I'm getting at, I guess, is when it starts going down a little bit again, don't panic. That's normal. Yeah. And it might go up again. It might go down a little, and you'll settle out somewhere. Maybe it'll be above where you are now. But don't panic when it goes
I had this thing I'd say to myself that it feels like my soul is dribbling out my butt. Like I have a wet fart.
Well, I'm really
last of my life force. Like I have to dole out life force to be able to operate. It's like I have to go to this meeting today. Okay.
You know, it's
let's do this, and then
it's actually really hard to hear everything you just said. I don't quite know why, but I'm also very happy that that's happened for you. So I'm glad about that. And the other very important thing, which if at all possible, I highly recommend to everyone, especially if your life is in some sort of disorder or chaos, is like break your routine. And I'm not saying like do some crazy movie where you go and you live on a farm in like the Bahamas or something. What I mean is just like house sit for someone else for like a month, or move your bedroom to the living room and move your living room to the bedroom, or move your computer downstairs, or start cooking at a different time of day. Just do that every once in a while. And then, because sometimes what happens is you don't know why, but you suddenly feel way better, and you're like, or I'm going to be vegetarian for a month. Like just break your routine. And what that does is it shows you, wait, I don't know what, but something improved.
Yeah, well, I didn't know, like I tried to do the same things besides basically air I breathed, that's why I could sleep so well when I was at the friend's house in Victoria.
Yeah.
And none of those things seemed to work, so I was like, oh, is this just a temporary thing that works a little bit?
But when, so what you went to your friend's house, it told you, okay, there is a better life out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And then that gives you a place, you didn't figure it out for a while, but it gave you a place to start, and that's the great thing.
It's terrifying. It's actually terrifying that we have this depression epidemic, this mental health epidemic. And something as simple as air is not moving around my house, and I spend most of my life in my house, is making me miserable.
Well, you remember Lacey Green? She changed her diet and she stopped being a SJW?
I'm talking about, like, you changed your diet. But it's terrifying how many things there are that can murder you, basically. Because...
Forget murder.
No,
there's people that go insane.
That's what I mean. Like, murder as in your soul is diminished.
And then you look for answers everywhere.
Yeah.
You start saying it's the capitalists, it's the You know, it's the immigrants, it's the capitalists,
Yeah.
it's the socialists, it's the Jews, it, it's
The Nazis.
well, they do anything wrong? But
Like, even right now, talking to you, like, having this podcast, this is a better air environment, but I don't
marginally.
Yeah. I don't have this, but, like, CO2 builds up in you and it sticks around.
Yeah.
I don't have this level of fatigue. Like, I didn't even get the best sleep last night, but it's, like, my, let's say I have a video game terms, right? I have an HP bar.
Yeah.
And it's my oxygen bar, my wakefulness. You know, like, you get a debuff and, like, you can't actually get to max health anymore? Yeah. I feel like that was at, like, 60% debuff.
Yeah, that's chronic fatigue. Yeah. And that's like flu, like long flu-like symptoms,
Yeah.
like COVID and others. Like flu does this more often than COVID actually, but that's what those do. It's chronic fatigue. It diminishes your life and it makes everything harder. And it's so I was taking a drug called nystatin, and it's in a solution of sugar and alcohol, neither of which I handle very well. And so I was taking this thing 4 times a day, and it was this. What terrified me was I didn't really feel that different, right?
Yeah.
I was playing Mario Kart, and I was getting last place every time. I've gotten gold on the hardest difficulty on every Mario Kart course.
Yeah.
I was getting last place on normal every time, and I didn't feel any different. And I didn't see anything I could do differently. I was like, the AI get better? Am I just like I couldn't?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You don't know there's hell until you're out
Like
of it.
it was terrifying because I was like, I can't do anything different because I'm doing my best and I'm not making any mistakes, and yet I'm at like half capacity.
Yeah.
It's like what's going on? It's you don't realize you have these
Yeah.
weights on you, and it's terrifying.
So I'm happy for now that's gone, but I think about the rest of the world on this, whatever it is.
Well, you know, like the fall of the Roman Empire with the
Yeah.
lead is the theory.
Well, that thing there, but even like, who knows what it is causing the thing, but
Me. Female hormones in the water supply.
well, that could be one. But like, let's say that you have a bunch of problems. Saying you're a depresso espresso person. Like, you're the person who revels in their own depression. Your joke is you're depressed. You spend too much time online. Now, the person spending too much time online, no, that's not what's making them depressed. The online is
The symptom.
the symptom. Why they're, and it's like, oh, you need to go out and get exercise, and exercise makes them feel a little bit better. But it's because they're leaving their room. Like, literally.
That's what I mean, break routine.
Yeah, break routine. Literally. I recognize the pattern that the month after Christmas, for the past 2 years, like, basically the whole time I've been living where I'm living, is that 2 or 3 years now? Like
3 years.
Yeah, 3. Past 3 years, the month after Christmas has been the worst month of that year for me.
And that's because it's the most cooped up.
Yeah, it's because it's cold outside. I don't do my outside exercises. And so I'm inside the lobbies.
And it's dark.
Yeah, it's dark. Because like the walking around outside that I do in the evening or just walking around, it helps because you're in a different environment, but sleeping in that environment is just not going to be good at all. And when you're in this state of depression, you huddle into it. You curl up into a ball. And so you stick in your house more. And so then you're getting the more of the CO2. Or if it's something else, like you turn to your, like if it's food, like the case of you, sugar and whatever, carbohydrates, is you eat the carbohydrates because they give you that moment of energy.
Yeah.
And it tastes good, and so there's comfort, and it's easy.
Well, I didn't even do that really, but it was still enough.
Yeah, but some people can be like that, I bet.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And so you turn to that, and you curl up into that, and if it's...
You're talking about loneliness, actually, and I want to point out that it's a famous quote, Bertrand Russell, maybe? Or no, not Bertrand Russell. Philosopher, anyways. Most of man's problems are because he cannot be in a room alone by himself. Yeah. And I don't think loneliness is a bad thing. Or rather, I think if you're feeling lonely, your problem is not that you don't have people you're spending time with. Your problem is you. And but by that I mean, maybe you don't have enough oxygen. Yeah. Maybe you don't. But because people say, "Oh, he's isolated." And he's. It's.
I realize this. It's funny.
You don't need friends when you're doing well, kind of.
Yeah. Well, part of it, but so basically, right around the time like I decided to do this, I also decided that I was going to do 2 social things. I went to Titans for a bit, and then I went to a martial arts class. Then the next night, I went to a much longer event at Titans, and like the quality of air in that basement, who knows, was like a bunch of nerds down there. But I was like, I'd been trying to do events at Titans earlier, and I'd show up there, and I'd just sort of like talk, like say a few words, and I was like, no, I don't feel this, and I'd leave.
Yeah.
I completely in the way of myself, and that's like I'm lonely. I should have stuck around. Or like
So the loneliness wasn't the problem.
Yeah, one of the things was I got to there, and it's like, oh, I'm half an hour early. Well, I have shopping to do, so I'll go do the shopping. And then I went home. It's like, no, you idiot, just stay there for like 30 minutes. But no,
again,
that person...
it wouldn't have made it. I don't think it would have made that much of a difference. Like,
sense.
you would have felt better, I think. But I don't think it would have been the solution.
Yeah, I would have felt better because the people would have helped. I mean, I have a weird balance of... I think all antisocial people do, to an extent of... It's nice to be around people, and there's a certain amount you want to, but there's like two... You know how a cat, it's like, pet my cheek, pet my cheek, pet my cheek. Okay, that's enough.
So, me and my friend over there, right?
Yeah.
We're both fairly, like, extroverted in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And we both love being by ourselves.
Yeah.
I wonder... It's kind of funny. Like, we're totally content by ourselves. And
I'm mostly content by myself.
I do wonder... It is weird, the whole dynamic there. I think... But yeah, like, what I'm getting at is not that being with friends is bad.
Yeah.
It's that people... Often outsiders looking at a depressed person will point to every problem under the sun and say, I'm going to fix you. You need to be with friends. You need to do this. Or you're alone. Or people beat themselves up. I'm a loser. I have no friends. I don't have a girlfriend. It's like, those aren't going to solve your problem.
Yeah.
They'll help. You'll feel better. These
things make you feel good if you have depression or if you don't.
They will give you...
good is better than having depression.
They will give you this... They will give you... They're not the only source, but they can be a source of strength to help you figure out what's wrong.
Yeah.
But
like I talked about my willpower dribbling out of me.
The exception to this is if you have agoraphobia. Yeah. If you have agoraphobia, getting out and seeing friends might actually be the solution. Mm-hmm. But and you will get slight agoraphobia from isolating for too long. Yeah. But I just so often say, oh, he's isolating, he's withdrawn, it's all terrible. It's like, no, let the person be alone.
Yeah, but
let yourself be alone.
If that thing with the mold is true, like I suspect the mold probably causes depression as well, and like the bacteria in the drywall, and just like on that level of like, you know, we talked earlier, I think, about Gaia.
Yeah.
It hates us. Or it doesn't hate. It's so indifferent to us that like we die.
How about this? People love being hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable, it's creative, and it's fulfilling, and it makes us feel great and happy.
Yeah.
Right? Cultures that farm, which is something people don't like doing. It's hard work. The food hurts you. It gives you arthritis. It makes your brain funny. It makes you feel sick. Cultures that farm outcompete cultures that are hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
And that is all of humanity's problems summed up right there. I think.
Yeah.
That's Satan.
Farming is Satan.
No, the fact that you can feed more people and you can keep more miserable people alive through agriculture than happy people through hunter-gathering, which means you will outcompete the hunter-gatherers, which means society will tend towards agriculture, which hurts people.
Well, I don't even know if it's the case that agriculture hurts people as much. Like the farming thing is
There's
miserable,
not cases of arthritis and like joint inflammation and stuff before agriculture.
Okay. It's just even like the things we add to like that's probably made it worse.
Right. My point is not to put all the blame on agriculture. Yeah. My point is that it's not Gaia trying to kill us. Yeah. It's that we naturally tend towards things that keep more people alive at the expense of our own quality of life.
Yeah.
And then we call it progress because there's more people alive living longer in more pain and more misery. Now, I'm not total doom and gloom about technology. I think this is actually something, maybe I don't know how many people think this way, but I think this is a dip we can come out of and rise higher than we were before. I think agriculture was a like 40,000 year investment, and it's starting to pay off with AI, maybe. I
think it is the investment of time because short and sweet, or you can live long despite the suffering and enjoy the long life.
Yeah.
Because like think of, I haven't had a kid, but like the death of a child, right? That's horrible. It's like one of the worst things people can experience. And people like children had like a 50% casualty rate or something insane for a short period, and then even after that, like it's only been in the last like I think
Victorian era was bad.
It's only been in the last 40 or 50 years that kids haven't had a 20% death rate?
I don't know
or it's like a ludicrous number.
I don't know how much we can talk about this on YouTube, and I don't know how much confident I would be in these statistics. But people who get vaccinated seem to get sick more often than people who don't. And they might have higher rates. That anti-vaxxer guy, the autism guy, you know how it was like vaccines cause autism?
Yeah.
That's not what he did. He said there's mercury in the vaccines, and it seems to cause autism. And people who get the vaccines seem to have a higher rate of autism. But at the time, there was a program to push out a massive amount of vaccines. And because they were really worried about a disease. And they said, okay.
Look, if our most popular video, whether you go out on that, got away with it, you're fine.
He said, basically, they were worried about an outbreak of a disease. And they said, we need to get like a massive amount of these vaccines out. Yeah. Mercury is a problem, we all agree. But all the vaccines we made have mercury. Next year, they won't have mercury. But this year, we have to get these out. So we're going to... Now, this is the conspiracy mind. Right? I don't know how... You know, you have to look at the story from different... But this is the point of view I hadn't heard before. Chuck them under the bus, get the vaccines out, and then fix the problem. And so vaccines since 2001 have not had mercury in them.
No, they've had aluminum instead.
That's to cause a inflammation response,
it's
actually.
An adjuvant. There's a whole different problem with that. It's
But then you look at dementia, and it's aluminum in the brain.
Yeah, well, so here's the problem with the adjuvant.
I have to go soon, so...
Yeah, it's on the adjuvant of the aluminum, because I wanted to bring this up for a while. It's the, like, not the WHO, but like the health regulation, is aluminum has a level of how much you can take before it's bad for you. And in the injection, it's below that level. However, that does not account for environmental aluminum that people are exposed to. If you add the environmental exposure aluminum to the aluminum that the injection has, it exceeds what's considered the safe level. But the health expert on this and
looks at the one thing
regulations looks at this injection is below the level, so it's safe, and our environment is below the level, so it's safe. But when you add them together, it's not like, oh, this is a little bit worse. Like,
they're like both at 90% or something.
Yeah, both at 90%. And even when you go over 90%, like with the carbon, my thing is you can sit at about 500 in an area, and that's fine. You double that to 1,000, that's really bad. You go 1,000 to 1,100, that's even worse. And I was sitting at 1,200, and then 2,000's awful. But like even just like 1,600, like once you exceed certain levels, things get really bad.
So what I was getting at with the vaccine, I guess, just first of all, if I'm wrong, please let me know. And also, please don't, I can't ask this of anyone because I do it myself, but don't quote me as, if anyone listens to this, don't quote me as knowing what I'm talking about. Look for the original sources as you can. I'm sorry that I'm making you do work on this, and rather than being better myself, but I in conversation, you just bring stuff up, right? Yeah. And because
we don't have a Jamie to bring that up for us.
Yeah, I'm not completely confident in my claims, and they are quite extreme to be spreading about, because that's how misinformation spread.
Yeah.
And look, I hate misinformation used as the censorship thing, but that is actually information that could be wrong, that is very compelling to spread about. But we'll go with it for the moment, with the idea that, okay, childhood deaths have gone way down. And so vaccines might actually, well, I think it's fairly obvious, unless there's some weird other effect going on. It seems fairly obvious vaccines greatly prevent childhood deaths.
Yeah.
The question is, would you rather have a bunch of children alive? Okay, let's make it as bad as possible. Would you rather have a bunch of children alive with autism and allergies, weak immune systems? Yeah. Or would you rather have 50% die in childhood and they live pain-free lives and easy socialization and and they never get sick? And that is not a yes or no. That is a
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be one of the 50% that die.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be one of the 17% that get autism or whatever, right? Like, if that is what it does. And again, what he found was that there seems to be a link between vaccination in children getting autism and between mercury and autism. So he figured it's the mercury, and there's no longer mercury in the vaccines.
Yeah.
So it's not saying vaccines cause autism. It's saying, can we reconfigure this stuff? Yeah. And they did. Yeah. So, still feel bad. Do you see Never Knows Best got in like this weird internet drama recently? Did you see that?
No, I don't even know who he is.
Yeah, he's a games reviewer I love to watch. But he released a video where he's like, just stop having hate mobs descend on people. That was his video, basically. Yeah. And so Mahler did a video mocking him, and Patrician TV did a video mocking him, and Krios video mocking him, and it's like, I said to Mahler, "You're missing the point of this video," and Mahler pulled out my comment during the live stream and said, "Oh, look at you, bleeding heart hippie," and this. Now, I don't think Never Knows This did a very good video, actually. I think he did the same thing he was trying to argue against in the video. But the point of the video still stands. And it's just... I was like, wait, are all the people I watch on YouTube just psychopaths that enjoy tearing apart other people? And the only reason I watch them is because they tear apart people that I think have bad ideas. Not because they're actually... they're good at tearing apart people, but it's not because they have... Like Sargon, you look at him. He has a lot of thoughts in his head that let him tear apart people.
Yeah.
But someone like Mahler might just tear apart people because he enjoys doing it. And I was like, oh, jeez, that makes me sad.
That's why I like the aristocratic spoon, because he fully admits that he's a psychopath that likes tearing apart people.
At least that's it, I guess, yeah.
I mean, he doesn't outright say, but he does. I'm a jerk. Like he calls himself a jerk.
And I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to implement contemporary internet drama right at the end of our video for no reason. It's just I said something that could very easily be spread and misappropriated, and I could be totally wrong.
Yes.
And there's a book about this that I want to read, but I've got a backlog of like 400 books, and literally, and I'll get to it eventually. And then once everyone's forgotten and have spread it around the world, I'll be like, actually, let me close the door on that barn.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe I'll be like, it was way worse than I thought.
You should fix that downfall hairdo.
Just to look. It's hard running a Reich, okay? Okay, I really got to get going.
Right.
Okay, well, do you think if we had... Oh, it makes me feel sick. I don't know. No, I can't do it. Okay, bye.